Hey guys, and welcome to a podcast on my Jack Rabbit podcast channel. I am joined here today with the one and only Golden Age Geek.
Hello.
Apologies for that very unprofessional start there. I am so new to this, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, but we're going to try and make this stream work as best as we can. So we're just here for a bit of a chit chat today. I've got a lot on my mind. I feel like I really need to get out, and I thought, who better to join me than my friend Golden Age Geek. If you are unfamiliar with his channel, if you just want to plug yourself and things you do.
Yeah, so Golden Age Geek on YouTube, I talk, about pretty much anything pop culture, whether it's DC, Marvel, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor, the usual sort of franchises. But in the past few months, I've been just focusing in on Doctor Who because, the new season, there's loads of news surrounding it. And Doctor Who, I would say, is my one true love. Loads of other people, they like all these other franchises and they sort of share their love equally amongst all those. But me, if a genie appeared and said, right, if you could have one franchise forever and it would be great, but you have to get rid of all the others, what would it be? I would say Doctor Who. So yeah, I've had a blast, even though it's been a messy few years in regards to Doctor Who. I've had fun discussing it with people and reviewing it and looking back on some of the old stuff before having to suffer through the new stuff. But that's mainly what I do.
And it's such a wonderful community to be a part of, I think, and despite everything going to shit, it's if there's one thing Doctor Who still does, which it has always done, and that's bring people together, for better or worse. And I think out of all this negativity, if I could say one positive effect, is that I think, we've grown a really strong community, and it has united the fans in many ways, especially with how bad things have gotten, which is really great to see.
Yeah, and when it comes to fandom, it's very tricky ground to sort of cover because I feel like fandom has evolved over many years. Because back in the day, when you talked about comics and entertainment, the fans or the people that were engaged with it were really engaged with it. They bought all the stuff, they knew all the stories, they were well versed. But now we sort of live, and I suppose it kind of links into the rise of social media and influencers and that sort of thing. The people nowadays who if you were to read the mainstream media, would be seen as fans are not really fans. They're these, shills online who ship people and do all this weird sort of fan fiction. And there's nothing wrong with fan fiction, but I think people know what I mean when I say that. They're sort of, it's all, I'm sorry if you hear that outside, by the way. I don't know if that noise is coming through. But yeah, I think when it comes to fandom, it is very strange because when people think of fans, they're not really talking about fans. They're talking about these people that they're not really engaged with the content. It's more sort of them putting themselves into the stories and not really staying true to it. And I see it all the time. I like to, even though I'm on this sort of corner of the internet that is very much different. As you've said, we've all sort of come together, and it's a very weird sort of place, but in a good way. I do sometimes like to keep up with the general audiences and the sort of mainstream fandom. I watch some of these reaction channels to see what they think of certain episodes, and most of the time it's overwhelmingly positive because they don't dare say anything negative. But those sort of channels, I think, of what has sort of like overtaken fandom in the sense that it's not all about honesty. It's more about keeping up appearances. It's a very tricky thing to talk about. But I think people who have been in these spaces for a few years would know what it is I'm sort of talking about in that regard.
No, absolutely. And I think we are starting to see a shift. I think, especially in Star Wars. I don't know if you know the channel Star Wars Theory.
Yes,
I
yeah,
think
I
he's a
do.
great channel. I've always liked him. I wasn't really too happy when, the Friday Night Tights were dissing him. But of course, that's completely changed now because I think he's had the courage to kind of come out and go, no, this is just playing bad. And what I also think is a great thing is I think political alliance or, wherever you are on the spectrum, I think that's starting to not matter anymore. Whereas, a few years ago, it was all people ever talked about. It's like, for example, when the female doctor was cast, if you didn't like it in any way, you were, the furthest far right you could be. You'd be labeled as all sorts. It was this very kind of you're with us or you're against us mentality. But I think now a lot of these franchises have just gotten so unbelievably bad that you're starting to see a lot of negative consensus, even from what would be considered the general fandom. And also, I think something that's not really considered is most people tend to just stay very quiet, because one, they just might think, oh, it's not worth to get a bunch of people screaming at me, or two, they just rather just go off and do other things. I know some people I've spoken to at work have said, oh, I used to love Doctor Who, but unfortunately, it just gotten so bad, I just lost interest. And I think that is the general
Mm.
consensus. And I think a lot of the fans who say positive things and who that aren't necessarily wokies or whatever you want to call them, I think they are one in denial, and they can't accept that it's bad because they've built their YouTube channels around that particular show, and they rely on it. They rely on the brand to keep them going. Or two, they are genuinely frightened because they don't want certain people coming after them. And I think it's horrible that we live in a world like that, that you can't, voice or speak how you want to speak at the fear that some crazy person could come after you. I think it's just wrong.
Yeah, and this whole bringing politics into entertainment is a bunch of, it's a bunch of rubbish, and I don't think it belongs anywhere in, fandom and entertainment in general, especially
No.
not the actual movies or television and stuff. And I think that's what kind of woke me up to the whole sort of unfortunate situation surrounding not only Doctor Who, but these other franchises, is that I noticed the difference in how people were speaking. So back in the Moffat days, it was kind of like a trendy thing to hate on Moffat. Always, he's doing this trope again. Oh, this is a classic Moffat story. There's a big red button. Oh, of course. But then when it came to the Chibnall era and Jodie, if you dare say anything, remotely that comes across as you criticizing it, you were labeled all these things, sexist and all that. And I noticed, as I said, people back in the Moffat days would happily criticize him and no one cared. It was like, oh, okay, yeah, you didn't like that. It was kind of a cool thing to kind of shit on stories that you didn't really like, and people didn't really bat an eyelid because it's just, oh, that's what they think about stories. But when it came to the Jodie era, when people wanted to criticize episodes, they would always preface it with something like, oh, it's not that I hate women. Oh, it's not that I hate all this progressive stuff.
Yeah.
I'm a big supporter of it. Please don't cancel me. And I'm thinking, well, why are you talking like this? Back in the day, we used to, start trash talking about all these movies and shows, and it was great and no one really cared. But now you're speaking as if someone's put like a gun to the back of your head. Is it, well, why are you doing this?
Well,
And then I thought,
I firmly believe that this is the reason why Chibnall made the Doctor a woman, because he knew his writing was bad and he wanted a scapegoat for when people would criticize that. That might be far-fetched, but that's what I believe. I don't believe for a second that these people actually care about the causes they talk about.
No, of course they don't. And I think another reason for it as well is because I said this when season 11 came out. It's a very boring season. There's nothing, there's no like returning villains. There's nothing that even resembles Doctor Who. So I think if it was just another season and it was another male actor, it would have been forgotten and no one would have talked about it. But because he had the female Doctor, the first female Doctor, that kind of solidified his stories as having some sort of significance, because there will always be remembered as the ones featuring the female Doctor. So I think it was his way of sort of setting his era in stone and attaching himself to Doctor Who forever.
Yeah, and that's why he made all of the creative decisions that he made on top of that. It wasn't about doing what was good for the show. It was about leaving your mark on it. But it does kind of beg the question, well, don't you want to leave a positive mark, on it instead of completely destroying it? I also think as well that unfortunately, because of the times we're living in, a lot of people just want to appear very virtuous. And I think a lot of them are just showing how utterly disconnected they are from reality. But I hear a lot of these talking points a lot, and there was a time when I actually got tired of them, because I felt like people were just saying the same buzzwords over and over again. But no, it's like with Russell T Davies especially, I have really seen this. I am struggling to understand the psychology of that man. I really am.
Yeah.
I do not understand how he can claim to love this show and to want to do what's best for it when every decision he makes seems to be almost intentional damage. And I think a perfect example of this, I don't know if you've seen those very bad Doctor Who. They're almost like Doctor Who Confidentials, but nowhere near as good. I've forgotten the name.
Oh, Doctor Who Unleashed.
That's it. And it was for the Giggle, and he did
Hmm.
this interview where he was talking about bi generation, and I swear to God, I'm gonna have to do my impression here, but he almost comes across as a smug git who knows exactly what he's doing and knows that this is going to annoy people because and if you listen to the tone in his voice as well, I'll try and mimic it as best I can because of course I
I
didn't.
love your RTD
Oh,
impressions.
thanks. I've become sort of infamous for them, like in some corners, but I'll try and replicate it as best as I can because I haven't got a clip. But he's talking about bi generation, and then it's just like it's a new thing. Imagine how much fans really love new things and will really rejoice when this happens.
Yeah.
And it's just what play
I
that
think
again.
I think what it is in part is that I know he had a history of, doing television before the 2005 revival of Doctor Who, but over the years he sort of rose to prominence in larger circles, right? And
Hmm.
for a span of time, he went over to America and was sort of mingling with all the Hollywood elites and stuff. And I think he's just become one of those that he's become part of that crowd, so he has to follow all of their beliefs and what they do with entertainment, which is very much tearing down the past to build up something in their own image. I think that's what it comes across, because I always watch these interviews with him from 15 years ago, and the way he talks is the way he talked back then is so different to how he speaks now. I was
Yes.
watching one yesterday, and someone brought up, I can't remember the interview because I've just been, digging up all these interviews from everywhere around the internet. And someone said something like, Doctor Who now seems to be more topical, bringing, current day issues into it. Can you explain that? And he said, and it's so different to what he says now. He said something along the lines of, well, Doctor Who appeals to a lot of children, and I think we shouldn't be writing stories that make them worried about the future or worried about the world they live in today, because they see that all the time on the news and they're taught about it in schools. They need to be given a show that allows them to escape and go to new worlds, and we shouldn't bring all these issues into it. And I'm thinking, hang on, where the hell is this guy? Because this is a guy nowadays that is saying, the one interview from Doctor Who Unleashed that really irritated me, and the more I think about it, the
Hold
more it
on, I'll
irritates
do an
me,
impression.
is
Is it this one? Is it the homophobia, transphobia, all goes away when you introduce these ideas calmly, quietly, when they're young.
well, it wasn't that one, although that one is, that one did
The creepy one.
infuriate me as
Yeah.
well. It was the one from Dot and Bubble, which I don't know if you know anything about that episode, but
I know about it, and I haven't watched the interview, but I've read the basically what he says. He says like, "How long did
yeah,
it take you to spot that there were no people of
yeah,
color in
exactly.
the episode?"
Yeah, he said, so the entire base of the story is there's this sort of like bubble full of all white people. And he literally said, and if you didn't notice that, then what does that say about you? And I'm thinking, wait, so you're calling the audience, the vast majority of people, racist just because they don't think the way you think. And that really irritated me,
It,
because back in the day, even like we're in a very different world now, even compared to like the 2018 like Last Jedi days, where back then, this sort of progressive woke stuff wasn't really said explicitly in the dialogue. It was more sort of implied. But now they're not even hiding it anymore. It's,
no,
it's we hate you, we're above you, and we're going to tell you what to think. And I'm like, yeah, piss off.
but
Like,
it just baffles me that this man is so unaware. I firmly believe that he has some kind of bipolar because he he does an episode proclaiming that, I mean, he's obviously representing us in the way he says, like, these people and all that, and they're all in a bubble and thing, but he's so stupid that he doesn't realize that's not us, that's the other people.
Yeah,
But
exactly. And
the
this is what I
social
brought
media
up
of it.
in, yeah, like in the giggle, right? When the toy maker says the 21st century is so bad. All these people nowadays are canceling each other and arguing and dividing. And I'm thinking, wait, that's not us. Even though I know it was trying to be a commentary on, the general public, like us. I'm thinking, no, that's people like RTD, who, when
Exactly.
people don't agree with him, he blocks them out. And the same with Dot and Bubble. And I kind of, in my video review, I said, was this episode unintentionally based? Because it kind of, the message they're trying to send of who these villains are, that is, RTD's crowd. You have these elitists who look down on other people, that matches RCD and his crowd. You have people who, when they're not met with positive comments, they block people and throw them to the side. That's what RCD does. And just things like that. And I know the episode was trying to be a commentary on people he's very much against, but because he lacks self-awareness, it came across as, he is exactly like those people. And and again, it is just the lack of self-awareness that really irritates me. That they'll preach about, we need diversity, we need inclusion. Well, hang on a minute. Russell T Davies is white, Julie Gardner's white, Phil Collinson's white, Jane Tranter's
Exactly.
white,
Mark
all
Gatiss
of
is
his team
white.
are white,
Toby
and he has
Whithouse
the
is white.
gall to say that if we don't think it's problematic to have an all-white thing, then we're racist. So again, he is exactly, the villain he claims to be against.
Exactly. And I've come to this conclusion that those who act the nicest and pretend to be the most virtuous are the ones you have to watch out for.
Yeah.
Because, it's oftentimes they're trying to hide something. And, all this stuff that came out about John Barrowman and the things with Eccleston and what he was saying behind the scenes was like, it's almost as if they've got a skeleton in the closet they really don't want getting out. And so,
Oh yeah.
we're going to fill our shows with all this stuff and hopefully they'll leave us alone.
Yeah, whenever I look at the one thing that I always hated, right, was in, particularly when I was in school and all this, where I'd see people just, falling head over heels for these celebrities and, oh, they're just like us. And I'm thinking, no, they're not. They hate you. They actively, I assume, that every single celebrity just hates me by default, because that way I can't be, disappointed when they come out and say something ridiculous. I just
Pretty
assume
smart.
I don't really care about the actors as much as I do like the characters that they play. Like, even back in the day, right, when I loved David Tennant and I loved the 10th Doctor, the idea of going to a convention and meeting David Tennant, it didn't really appeal to me because he's not the Doctor, and I know that. I know some people, and I don't blame them. They see the actors and they see the characters as well. But I've always been of, that isn't the Doctor. That's someone else. He was just playing the Doctor. So I've always had that mindset. And one thing I did want to touch upon, because we did mention Jodie and all that. When you're someone like me and you criticize and you heavily criticize all this modern Doctor Who, right? A lot of people will come into the comments and say things like, "Oh, you wanted to hate it from day one. You wanted to, find a reason to not like it," and it's absolutely ridiculous. Because I'll tell you my experience with Doctor Who and how I sort of came to this side of the internet. So back when Jodie was announced, I wasn't aware of anything political. If you said the word woke, I'd be like, "Well, what does that mean?" Right? I had no clue. So I saw there's a female Doctor, and I was like, "Okay, this is different. And we'll see what happens." So then I watched all of season 11 and I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it either. I watched it and I was like, well, that doesn't feel like Doctor Who. Something's off here. Something, this isn't the show that I've been watching for years. So before season 12 came out, I watched it again. I was like, well, it still doesn't feel like Doctor Who. Well, what's wrong with me? I should be screaming in excitement. This is Doctor Who, but I didn't feel that. And then when we got to season 12 and where everything was sort of let out the bag of their intentions behind Doctor Who, that's when I really saw all of the nonsense in season 11. So when it comes to canon and, lore changing stuff, that's always happened in Doctor Who. Moffat did it a lot. You'd always have these timey-wimey things that changed previous canon and all that. And I never had a problem with it because I knew it came from a place of love and, oh, we need to create a story, so we're going to have to change this and to make a good story out of it. And I have no problem with that. But then when it came to the Timeless Children and, they said, we did this because we're not proud of the fact that this, however, long franchise has been being run by white males, and it's predominantly been white males, and the whole history is built off white males. I was like, okay, so that's not right. That's a legitimately racist, sexist thing to say
Oh no, no,
because
it's only one way. It's only one way, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's when I sort of became aware of it because then I started looking back at all the season 11 stuff. And by the way, if you look back at season 11, Jodie's first one, it's, it screams white knight complex. I mean, if you look at Rosa, right,
Yeah,
there's been some changes to the timeline, so this black woman no longer takes a stand against racism, and then the entire resolution of the story is Jodie's Karen doctor has to come along and tell a black woman what she needs to do to stand up. And it's like, okay, well, I don't really think they thought about this because it comes across as black people didn't help themselves. It was all white liberals. And if trust me, if you go back to season 11, it comes across as being really ironic in the sort of progressivism that they tried to preach.
yeah.
And then
They
Flux. Oh my god, what was that? I had to sit through all of that, and
I only watched
that is
half.
still the worst Doctor I've ever seen.
I think I only made it through 3 of the episodes. That was including Power of the Doctor. It was
Yeah,
like I just couldn't, and it's a shame because in the Chibnall era, one thing I will say in its defense, I can't believe I'm doing this. I'm holding my head in shame while doing it, but one thing that does put it above RTD's era for me is there are little shadows of good Doctor Who in there. I found a clip of the lone Cyberman, and when I don't know if you remember the scene where that nurse is trying to keep the baby hidden and it
yeah, and
snaps her neck.
there's that scene where the mother's trying to appeal to him, and he says, "I did have children." Then he describes how he like tortured and killed them, and I was like, "Oh, that's dark." And
Oh,
when you
yeah,
come onto the lone Cyberman, that was such a great idea. The Cybermen have always been these, these human beings that have been placed in these metal cages and ripped of their emotions. So what happens when put back the emotions and all the anger and frustration? That was such a great idea, but
yeah.
that got ruined in the Timeless
Well,
Children as
yeah,
well.
it
But
didn't go anywhere because you built up that villain, and then the Master comes along, zaps him into an action figure, and not only that, but the whole idea we want to get rid of all of our organic components and become completely robot. Well, if you do that, you're going to die because by the looks of you, you're full of organic matter.
yeah.
The
When you
whole point.
mentioned the Master, then that just reminded me of Spyfall Part 2. That has to be the worst case of the progressivism backfiring because in Spyfall Part 2, the Master is hiding in, like, what was it, 1940s Germany or whatever. I'll just say that.
Yeah,
And
as a Nazi.
he's got a perception filter on him, so he appears as like a white German. And then Jodie turns it off and says, "Now they'll see you for what you really are." And I'm thinking, oh my god, that is such an awful line. That doesn't, you know, anyone just viewing that didn't
Yeah,
go ahead the way they wanted it to. And then it's implied that the Germans took him off to a where, and he had to escape from it. And this is supposed to be the Doctor who's done this. And then you have that scene with Graham and the TARDIS when he's like, "Oh Doc, I'm worried that my cancer will return." And she's like, "Well, I'm socially awkward, so I'm not going to help you." And it's like,
I
oh
know.
no. But yeah, there were little sprinkles of goodness in the Chibnall era. Again, very minuscule. I will say this, which Chibnall did better than both RTD and Moffat, although he didn't perfect it. How he treated the Sontarans, he returned them to the original black and silver design. They
Yes.
were more like the classic era. I mean, there were some scenes later on in Flux where he totally screwed them over, where they go into a shop and rob a bunch of chocolate and eat. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the hell is this? But
Oh,
in terms of the design and all that, he did that well. I The worst part I think about the Chibnall era, again, as I said before, is it made me feel bored all the time. And I think a key part of the reason why that was the case was because they got rid of Murray Gold and they brought in this new guy, was Segu Nakanola, is that his name? And his music was absolutely awful. And it wasn't even music, it was just a bunch of it was I think the way it would be classed as ambient sounds, right? Um, and the music, if you go back and you look at the early seasons of New Who, the music is what really added to a lot of the atmosphere. So to have that removed was really telling.
it
But I
was
I didn't
amazing.
mind The introduction sequence was all right. I thought that tried to lean back into more sort of classic Who. That was all right, but everything else just didn't work. And when people say, you know, if you criticize the Chibnall era, the first thing people are going to come at you with is, well, you just hate women. You don't like the female Doctor. That is actually not the thing I hate the most about the Chibnall era. I didn't like the way it was shot. They used a lot. They utilized a lot of low lighting. As I said, there was no music. Everything was the way it was directed. It was just off. So that's the thing I have the main issue with, by the way. So when people come at me with that, it's like, well, you don't actually know what my criticisms are. So I hated the production around it. First and foremost, the writing, of course, was awful. When you looked at these characters and they were saying these lines, you could tell that it was an actor saying it and not actually the character, which is the worst thing when it comes to, you know, a piece of entertainment. You should see the character first. But that wasn't the case with the Chibnall era.
I'm gonna be honest. I've said this to a few people. As I say, we're going to talk about our Doctor Who journeys next. So, in terms of my journey, back in 2017, when it was announced that the female Doctor was coming on, I was unsure, and I was worried, which is what led me to channels like Bowles Trek, and which led me to Gary and all that. But in spite of all the things they were talking about, I had no clue. I didn't know about, you know, what we would call wokeness today. You know, I wasn't really that aware
Yeah,
of it, to
same.
be honest. But I went into Series 11 genuinely with an open mind. I just kind of wanted to switch everything off. I just wanted to
Yep.
go in, and I'm like, look, it's not Moffat anymore. I had gotten so sick of his style, although I did actually quite enjoy Series 10. I thought at least he kind of went out on a high, I
Mm.
suppose. I don't know if I'd say the same today, but back then I enjoyed it. But I went in, and yeah, I just honestly, if they'd have had the writing of, let's say, Caves of Androzani or The Best of New Who, and they'd had a competent female actress, great actors, great cinematography, great design, honestly, I think I would have just settled straight into it. And you know, if they hadn't have been trying to push the politics, you know, maybe there could have been a legit reason why the Doctor became a woman. Maybe I don't want to say this in a well, I don't really care, but I could say the regeneration maybe went wrong because after all, the Time Lords gave the Doctor a whole new life cycle with Matt Smith, so maybe this was kind of like a bit of a dodgy episode. I always hated the idea that Moffat brought in that, yeah, Time Lords can just change between genders. I think it's stupid because I think gender is such a big part of a character, and to just change it with no explanation whatsoever is one thing, but then to go back and insinuate that actually originally it was the other gender and the other race and the whole timeless child
Yeah,
thing, I
that.
was just like, no,
Yeah.
I was completely done at that point, and I didn't actually watch the Timeless Child live. I missed it, and I came onto the internet to see poor Noel from the TARDIS zone, and everyone just going on like the world had ended, and I was just like, oh my god, what have they done? And I went back and I watched it about a year later, and even though I knew everything that was going to happen, it's still I was traumatized. I couldn't. It's like I couldn't unsee it at all. But uh, it's such a shame because we finally got the whole of the Chibnall era came and went, and even though it was a difficult 5 years, in all that time, so many people had given up on Doctor Who. They'd thrown it away. They'd even thrown the classic stuff away. And I, through all that time, had managed to keep going and managed to hold on with it and not give up on it and always hope that something, you know, that we get through this era. Maybe it would go off the air for a bit, but it would come back. It's just one era. Everyone can ignore it. Then it was announced that RTD was coming back. And I was just, you know, I had such a positive, just happy memories of his original era. And I was like,
Mm.
yes, he's coming back to fix Chibnall's mess because he's annoyed with what Chibnall has done. And, you know, he's like, right, step aside. I'm going to have to fix this, aren't I? You know, and I was just full of so much hope again. But then the interviews came out and he started running his mouth off on certain things, and Gatwa was cast. And I just remember I remember being so done. In fact, problem being actually had to calm me down because I was just like, no, it's over, it's finished. And, it's like, come on, look, I know and it's horrible that we have that sort of predisposed, the moment you see a person of color, oh, it's being done for woke reasons. It's like, yeah, well, you people have created this. If you'd have just stopped going on about it all the time, but so I calmed down and I kind of just said, well, I'll give it a chance. Yeah, I'm sure he's a really nice guy. He seems nice because he did that first interview. He says he wants to do the part justice, and we're like, oh, that's great. And then the second one came out when he was on the carpet with RTD, and there were the buzzwords. Strides taken in terms of representation, and I think there's a lot more that we can do. And there's RTD, like, they're like, oh, I think we're in a good place, also think we're in a worrying place.
Yeah,
Gotta
and he
go
also
back
said,
down.
and he was like, the Conservative government want to defund the BBC. We can't stand for this.
Ugh.
You have to vote this way in order to save Doctor
Excuse me,
Who.
you don't tell me how to vote. My university lecturer did the same thing. He was mouthing off to us like, it's your responsibility to vote, and it's just like, why? They're both liars, no matter which side you bloody go for.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, so obviously my alarm bells were ringing. And then, of course, as you know, and as a lot of people know, what I'm most famous for is the infamous being told to F off by
Yeah,
RTD.
which
And
is which is absolutely disgusting. I mean, the fact that RCD would say that to someone who like grew up with his original Doctor Who, someone who is very fond of his work, the fact they would just say that is
yeah.
indefensible.
Well, that's the thing. I was always an RTD era defender. I defended his era from the Classic Who fanatics, from the Moffat fans, and I always just said, "Oh, it was the best show on TV," and everything. And it's my personal favorite era. I love the classic series. Don't get me wrong. I went back. So we're going to talk about Doctor Who journeys, if that's okay. So my journey is I started with Dalek in 2005. I didn't start with Rose because I'd never heard of Doctor Who before. And my parents weren't exactly fans, but I remember seeing a trailer for Dalek and just asking my mom, like, what is that? And, I was captivated by it. So I watched that. And then for the first 2 years of my Doctor Who experience, I was only ever interested in Daleks. I didn't want to watch if the Daleks weren't in it. It was actually around about 2007 that I properly became a fan, because then I discovered the Cybermen, and then Runaway Bride was on at the time, which I really enjoyed. And then I thought, right, next series of Doctor Who, which was series 3, I'm going to watch properly. And I'm glad I did, because I became a super fan round about that year. In fact, my parents were worried by how much of a fan I was becoming. And in the same year, I discovered Classic Who because of a book my dad got me. And there were like 3 episodes you could get in issues of The Sun. They'd give you like episode 1 of stories just on these little DVDs. It was great. I got my first full story, which was Resurrection of the Daleks, because I needed a story with Davros in it. And blah de blah. So then David Tennant changed to Matt Smith, and that was always a big thing for me. I could never get over it. It made me hate Matt Smith to start with, actually, until I finally warmed to him
Yeah.
round about the anniversary, and then he left. I was like, oh bugger, I was just starting to like him. But one thing I will say is, a lot of people say that Chibnall's era is where the writing went downhill. I'm sorry, to me,
Mm.
the writing went downhill as soon as Moffat took over. I don't know if it was just his style, but
Uh,
I was never a fan of Series 5. I liked elements of Series 6. I actually loved Part 1. I thought it was dark, it was gritty. I was like, this is good. And then Part 2, everything went to shit. And I never understood why they had to split the series in half. And then Series 7, I remember at the bus stop before school, I used to say to my mate, I was like, that was crap, wasn't it? They were like, yeah. I even remember Day of the Doctor letting me down. I was like, oh, 50 years of the whole show, and that was it. But I don't know what your journey was like on that.
well, yeah, mine's a bit different. So I didn't actually see any Doctor until about 2014. I think it was 2014 or late. It was early 2014 or late 2013. So I, so that was like 10 years ago now. So I remember one summer evening I was bored and I was scrolling through Netflix, and there was this thing called Doctor Who, and some people at the time were like, "Oh yeah, I used to watch that. You may like it. Check it out." So I started back at Eccleston, and so I watched all through that. And I remember this was back when I was like a novice to technology. I got to the end of season 1. I didn't realize you could like switch at the top to go from season 1 to season 2. So at that point in time, I thought that season 1 was the only thing of Doctor Who. So I kept on just rewatching those episodes. And then one day I saw this little thing at the top where I could click the menu and select season 2. And I was like, wait, what? There was like 7 seasons there. And I was like, oh my God, I've just been watching these over and over again for weeks. So I saw, clicks on season 2 and I started watching all those. I remember season 1 was so captivating. The episode or the story that always stuck with me was The Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, the gas mask zombies. I remember many sleepless nights because of those things. So immediately I remember I was hooked on Doctor Who. I watched the first episode and I had to watch the second one. Then I watched the third one. I just kept on watching, so I didn't actually get
round about 2014. We had things like the Avengers and like cutting edge CGI. Did you not think that all this show that came out at that point was about 9 years ago? So did you not think, the CGI is a bit shoddy or anything like that?
Well, this is something that people always have a conversation with me about in general. I'm actually a fan of, like, it's going to sound weird, I'm a fan of pretty crappy CGI. I grew up with films like Spy Kids and that sort of, the Star Wars prequels, which haven't got the greatest CGI. I'm a fan of that sort of corny, cheeky sort of not perfect CGI, but you can see what they were going for. So no, I loved it. That didn't register with me for 1 minute. I just thought, oh great. I didn't question it. So I remember, I watched all through the Tennant stuff, and of course, at that point, I was a massive fan of David Tennant. He was like my hero at that point, And I remember I got to the End of Time Part 2, and like you, I saw Matt Smith, and I thought, well, okay, Doctor Who's over. I didn't watch any of the Matt Smith era. I didn't watch any of that. But as I say, I found Doctor Who around like 2014. So I remember advertisements for Capaldi's first season being on TV. So I watched his era. So I watched Eccleston, Tennant, Capaldi. I watched all that, and then I went back to Matt Smith.
Back to Matt, yeah.
Because Matt Smith's Doctor is probably the most sort of a layered Doctor of New Who, whereas because he's the youngest Doctor and he comes across as very quirky and quite comedic. But there are those moments. People always say this about Matt Smith's Doctor. They say he's like the old man with the young face. He looks young, but when he speaks and how he acts, he comes across as the oldest out of all of them. I don't know whether you sort of see that in his Doctor. That's how people always say.
I was going to mention, actually, my opinion of him has changed so drastically. I actually think he might be the best New Who Doctor now, and I'm not saying that because of his stories or his era. I think, to me, he does something wonderful. He's able to embody the classic Doctors in a young man's body. And I think it is a testament to his skills as an actor. And, seeing him in House of the Dragon, it's just, you still got it, Matt. He's a phenomenal actor. And I think, honestly, it was just, I think his introduction was mishandled. I think, the kind of regeneration was a bit overly silly. And also, I know lots of people love the 11th Hour. I do like it, but I don't absolutely love it. As a kid, I was just like, what is he doing? Like, why is he throwing bread out the front door? What's going on?
And that's why I didn't like him at the start, because I saw all these. Well, the reason I didn't like him at the start was because he replaced David Tennant. So I was like, screw this guy. But of course, I'd see clips on like YouTube, and I'd see him being all weird and sort of silly, and I thought, well, this isn't the Doctor. But it's because I didn't stick around for the actual episodes that I didn't see those moments where he was acting like the oldest out of all of them. And I know that you've mentioned from time to time that because of the current state of Doctor Who, sometimes it's kind of hard to go back to the previous stuff because the current stuff is so on your mind. And
yes,
I will
I'm
say
going to touch on that later.
Yeah, the reason I brought up is because that does apply to me sometimes as well. I mean, I can go back to series 1 all the way through to series 4, all of RCD's original run, and I
Mm.
can say, right, that's perfect. I still enjoy it, love it, amazing. But there are little things you pick up on, like I think Moffat and his Doctors, so 11 and 12, are more truthful to the character of the Doctor than 9 and 10, because the way Russell wrote it, and again, that's how I do think that RCD's mindset has changed drastically and all that. His original run is so different to his new run, but there are little elements there which I think he's always believed in. So, for example, in his era, he always wrote the Doctor as this sort of grieving mess that went around picking up women. Yeah, that's not really who the Doctor is. His
Yeah.
Doctor was always his Doctors were always romantic and like that. They were kind of like playboys with their TARDISes. Whereas with Moffat's Doctors, he wrote them as these quirky alien Doctors, and that's why I prefer. My favorite Doctor is the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith. He's my favorite now, which is funny because back in the day, Tennant was, and if you'd said to me then that Matt Smith was going to be, I'd be like, go away, you're talking nonsense. So 11th Doctor is my favorite, but then my second favorite's Peter Capaldi, because and I think I had a unique experience with him as well, because he was the first Doctor that I watched week after week after week. So I got to grow with him.
Mm.
Whereas, Eccleston, I'd like binge through in a couple of days. And it's very different when you're doing that as opposed to watching it week after week and with the rest of the world. So the 11th Doctor, I think, is absolutely amazing. Moffat kind of dropped a lot of that romance stuff. I mean, he kind of made it stick around a bit for the River Song, which I don't like. Which is
No.
why when I made that video saying that I didn't like the Doctor and Rogue, I don't know if you're aware, the Rogue character in the latest
Oh, I
season,
am
who's
aware. I wish I wasn't, but I am.
yeah, and I remember, of course, as soon as I criticized that, I knew people were going to come across and say, "You're a homophobe. You don't like this." And it's like, no, I don't like the Doctor being this way with anyone, whether it's Rose, River Song, or this guy. I don't like any of that. So I think for the most part, yeah, Moffat was able to write the Doctors a bit better and more truthful than RTD, and some of those elements have creeps into his new stuff, which is unfortunate. But I'm still able to look back on the old stuff and still enjoy it. I would still say that definitive Doctor Who for me is, RTD's first run all the way till the end of Capaldi. That to me is still definitive Doctor Who because I watched all that first. I didn't know about Classic Who, and of course I've gone back since and watched all of Classic Who, and I think it's great and all that. But because New Who was the thing I was introduced to first, that's always going to be what I think of as Doctor Who.
Of
And
course,
it
yeah.
doesn't matter, how many times people point out the flaws in RTD's original run or things like that, or how great Classic Who is. I'm always going to think of New Who in such high regard, and that's something I just can't control because that's something I grew up with, and that's something that means so much to me. So yeah, I would still happily defend that. It's everything from Twice Upon a Time onwards is not canon to me. I just don't even consider it Doctor Who because it's not trying to be Doctor Who. So
No.
yeah, I would say that's like my main journey summarized. I loved all that, and then I went back, and I think part of the reason why I love Matt's Doctor so much now is because I remember when it came to the end of the Capaldi run, I went through such a dark time then, and it was quite a depressing time. And I went back to Matt's run, and of course he's the most like energetic and quirky Doctor. So I was going through such difficult times that I saw this person that out of any of the Doctors took me away on the adventures, and it was so imaginative and it was so fairy tale like. It gave me so much enjoyment to sort of make those dark times disappear. So I think if I had watched Matt's run after David Tennant, after I'd seen all of his stuff, I don't think I would have enjoyed him as much as I do now, because again, it's that thing where entertainment comes across differently to so many people because people live different lives and they go through so many different things. And because I went through all those dark times, and then I was met with Matt's quirky, light-hearted Doctor to counterbalance that, I think that's why I loved his stuff so much.
Yeah, it's brilliant because you're kind of mentioning things before I can ask you. Actually, you've brought up a very good point there that we all change, and sometimes it can be a sad thing, sometimes for the better. And as that happens, our perceptions of things change. And I think it's wonderful that you've been able to kind of keep that and I love what you said about how you don't connect the actors to their characters, whereas with me, sadly, I think that I can't unsee or unhear the things I've heard, and it's caused a bit of a sort of a shockwave. I do think that since all of this whole wokeness started, it has just made me so critical because I think that's what everyone has become. That seems to be the mantra. Everyone's just critical, 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 and that sort of childlikeness of enjoying Doctor Who, no matter how silly or how over the top, has sadly for me just gone, and all I'm seeing with the show now is the flaws, and that is horrible. And I've gone back and I'm actually I'm watching RTD's original era. I've watched series 1, 2. I've not long just finished series 3. Series 1 I really enjoyed, even the more silly ones, but parting of the ways, that was my favorite Dalek story. I absolutely adored it, and you know, watching it recently, maybe I just wasn't in the mood, or maybe it was the wrong day for it, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I did as a kid. And series 2, it was quite a chore getting through some of those episodes, except for Impossible Planet and Satan Pit. That's still just as good now as it was back then. That's bloody amazing. It's a shame that writer only wrote for it once. But then got on to series 3, and I really didn't enjoy the Runaway Bride that much. And I think what's happened is because I've become exposed to so many other things in recent years, like uh, such cool sci-fi monsters like Alien, Predator, all the great ones, and just lots of great things. It's maybe just made me see RTD's juvenile and over sexualized and really just silly storytelling, like farting aliens and just everything being like a sexual metaphor, because RTD's whole career has just been him, and I hate to say this in this way, but it has just been him going on about sexuality and being gay.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, if that's what you want to do, obviously back in like the 70s, 80s, 90s, and that, like, yeah, that's a thing, you do that. But I think Doctor Who was really his only credit where that wasn't the central focus. But actually going back with the sort of veil lifted, you can see a lot of that in his original era. And I tell you, I'm dreading watching the Sarah Jane Adventures because I absolutely adore that show. And it's like,
Yeah.
what am I
Yeah.
gonna think of it now? What am I gonna think of it with my, I hate to say it, adult eyes? I hate that I'm an adult now. I'd rather be a child any day. Don't
Hmm.
know what that makes people think of me, but whatever. Um, but yeah, it's just, I just haven't been finding the enjoyment, and I think, you know, we'll get on to Tennant later, but, oh, I can't say the 10th Doctor is my Doctor anymore. I
Yeah,
really
yeah, I know.
can't. I
Yeah, I've
sorry,
seen the
go on.
flaws as well. Russell, and he's doing it now, but he also did it back then. He tried to humanize the Doctor too much. He made him all soppy and romantic. And if you consider him, especially in the End of Time Part 2, where he's talking about he wants to live and the fact that he has to save other people and sacrifice himself is not fair. And you really start to see, hang on, this doesn't feel like the Doctor. As you say, you start to pick up on those things. I mean, as you gain more experience in the world, you start to look back on those previous stories and some like lines in the dialogue, which when you were a kid you just looked over, they were sort of throwaway lines. You start to think about them a bit more, and I think it's because nowadays we're aware because of social media and how much they go on about it themselves. Like Russell will openly admit, this is my intention behind this story. You see a lot of the malicious intent behind a lot of the creative decisions. Oh, we're going to
Mhm.
have this character look this way so that we appeal to this person, and we're going to have them behave in this way to represent whatever. You start to look back on some of those previous stories and some of those lines, and there'll be a throwaway thing like, oh, that's the government for you, and you think, hang on a minute, what was that message for? And then you'll hear someone, a character, talk about, when I was young, I had to face all this oppression. And you think, wait, was that a reference to this? Was he alluding to that back then? You start to pick up on these little things, that you think, hang on, was that forced in? What was the intention behind that? That sort of thing. I mean, for the most part, I'm able to throw it off. People always come at me and say things like, "Oh, Doctor Who's always been woke." Oh, there was this line in season 1 where this alien said, "Ladies, gentlemen, and others," and they were like, "What do you think others was referring to?" They were referring to non-binary people, and I'm thinking, well, they're probably just referring to aliens or something. But yeah, I'm able to throw off some of those things, but you do start to pick up on some things, and it is sad, isn't it? I mean, one of the things that really bother me now that I've gone back and watched Classic Who and I've sort of learned that the Doctor is not supposed to be a romantic character in any way, shape, or form, is I look back on a story like School Reunion, and
Mm.
I loved that story. But once you start to think about the dialogue, it seems Russell has wrote the Doctor in that story as some like jealous ex. He says to Sarah, "Oh, once you left me, did you find anyone else?" And it's like, well, the relationship was never like that, you know.
Yeah,
And the way in those things, it makes me feel so sad, because I want to go back and watch those stories like I did all those years ago. But now, knowing what I know now, it's kind of hard because I'm seeing how his sort of not sort of political agenda, but his agenda to make the Doctor the way he would want to be in his head, it seeps through, and it's
there
awful.
there was a YouTuber who I love, and I'm going to give him a shout out because I think he's great. He's called Cody W1. I don't know if you've ever heard of him.
No.
He used to do these Classic Who and YouTube reviews, Classic Who and New Who sort of reviews in a Google voice because he didn't have the confidence to use his own voice. He does now, but the Google voice, just made it so funny. And he always used to talk of New Who as a fan fiction. Now, back in the day, this used to annoy me because I was like, well, no, it's Doctor Who. It's my Doctor Who. It's Doctor Who I grew up with. How dare you call it a fan fiction? But now I got so into Classic Who, and I think the same as you, Golden Age Geek. I think that this whole romantic thing, that's just not who the Doctor is. And I think
Yeah.
what Russell T Davies made was fan fiction. It was Doctor Who through his lens. And I don't
Mm.
think that should ever be how it's done. I think Terence Dicks said it best. He said, whatever a writer thinks and feels will tend to come out in the script as long as you're not preaching at people. Now, Barry Letts, who did the Pertwee era, he was Buddhist, and if you watch the Pertwee era, a lot of Buddhism is in there, especially, I mean, Planet of the Spiders, that is just, the whole story is centered around it. And he was a bit of a classic liberal. He was very passionate about the environment. That's why you got stories like Green Death, which ironically is one of my favorites, because even though yes, it is about the environment and corporate takeover, it's still a cool story because it has cool monsters and the computer is an amazing boss. He's like AI before AI was even a thing. It's like that they had these ideas and these concepts even back then. And it's such a great story. Nowadays, all you do is compare it to Chibnall's Arachnids in the UK, which is a
God.
direct rip-off of that story, to the point where I started swearing at my TV when I realised, the whole toxic waste being dumped makes insects go bigger. Oh, where have we seen this before? And the fact that he ripped off
Mm.
that story of all stories just infuriated me. But I digress. So the point is that Barry Letts being a Buddhist man, a lot of that did become injected into the show. But it was good that he had Terence Dicks there to balance him out, to take out, so like, oh, okay, and Terence Dicks was conservative. He was conservative. I don't know if he was Christian, but he was conservative. And they were best friends. I want to let that sink in. So Barry Letts was a lefty liberal Buddhist. Oh, inner peace, love and all that. Terence Dicks was a funny, you know, very upper lip conservative fella, and they got on brilliantly, and they worked together to produce what is, in my opinion, the best era in Classic Who. I know some people may disagree, but in my opinion, that's personally my favorite. And they balanced each other out. And I think the trouble with Russell T Davies is, if you look at the Fitzroy group, you know, they they are all of the same kind of belief. You know what I mean? They believe the same things, they
Yeah.
talk the same things, except maybe Gareth Roberts. But Gareth Roberts only got kicked out because he disagreed with the whole transgender issue, which in his mind was going too far. But if you look at Gareth Roberts, so he's a gay man, and he did also put some of this annoying, flamboyant, romantic stuff. A lot of people seem to be heralding Gareth Roberts as a kind of hero, which maybe he is. But personally, I only liked one episode he did, which was Unicorn and the Wasp. But even that had a gay couple in it. It was a little thing on the side. You never thought much of it, but it's there. And it's just like, oh, really? Come on. And I don't mean that in a homophobic way. I just mean it's so in your face, even in the episode. It's just like, but I still really enjoy that one massively, Unicorn and the Wasp. But as I was saying, I think a lot of the Fitzroy, the problem with them is they all have the same views, they all have the same, and none of them, as you say, will dare say no to RTD. And I think he allowed his original era to become just his personal fan fiction, which I don't think is right. It would have been really nice if they could have brought in some of the classic Who writers. They did bring in Graham Harper, who was famous for directing Caves of Androzani, and he had lots of involvement in his original era. But like I say, I don't think he was fully understanding, because he directed Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which I haven't gotten round to rewatching that now, but from what I remember of it, I thought it was a great story, but I hated how Donna, the Dr. Donna, all she did was flip a few buttons and it just blew all the Daleks up. I was like, really?
Yeah.
I just like, you go to all the effort to make the Daleks. I mean, they brought the Daleks back in a brilliant way. It's like they took all the criticisms of them and said, right, we'll address that. They can fly, even though they did in Remembrance. The sucker is now a thing that can rip a person's face off. It can hack into any computer panel it touches. It can download things, or just addressing those little jokes, the Daleks. They brought them back in a wonderful way. And then as the RTD era progressed, they kind of just became more and more stupid. Like the whole having to say exterminate, just pull the trigger. Do you know what I mean? Like, you look at classic Daleks, they don't keep shouting exterminate. They do sometimes, but not all the time. They just pull the trigger. But in Dalek, the Dalek, and I urge all of you to go back and watch Dalek, the Dalek only says exterminate 3 or 4 times in the whole episode. Mostly it's completely silent and it's just shooting, it's massacring everyone. And it's done so well. Then you go to Evolution of the Daleks and you got all them human Daleks shooting at them with fully automatic Tommy guns. Dalek Tommy guns, which is great, and they're just going exterminate, and maybe shooting 2 or 3. It's like, you guys could have won that fight if you would just shut up and kept shooting. You know what I mean? But as I say,
Yeah, and
there's all these things that I see now that are just wrong with it.
yeah, and I think a lot of the RTD defenders, they always come at you with, oh, what about this scene? You say Doctor Who is woke now, but this scene was then back then. And what people have to consider is that when we talk about political messaging, we're not really talking so much about political messaging as much as what they deem to be political messaging. So, as you mentioned, in the Third Doctor era, there were a lot of stories that addressed, greedy businesses and things like that. But you also had stories that tackled corrupt governments, that sort of thing. So that kind of balanced it out. But I'm fine with those sort of stories because I'm a person who I consider myself pretty centrist. Yeah, I'm sure there are greedy business people out there that just want profits and they don't care about humans. Of course, that's, they don't care about their workforce. Of course, that's like a thing that happens, it happens all the time. But I think on the opposite side, there are also, corrupt governments that don't care about the people. They're not there to improve your lives. So I'm a pretty balanced person. I don't care if you want to do stories about either. I think what people have an issue with, and this is certainly what I have an issue with, is how they're not tackling those political points now. It's actively against the audience. So they'll say things like, we need to show men as being subservient and weak because we need to make women stronger. And I'm thinking, well, that's not a political point. That is genuine, racism and sexism. You're just doing it to the other side. That isn't a political thing. They'll deem it as a political thing. We're making political strides. It's not a political stride. They're just showing their, bigoted social beliefs. So when we talk about Doctor Who's become so political, and someone says, "Oh, well, the Doctor mentioned this news corporation and how they're abusing their workers," oh, isn't that a political thing? Yeah, it is. But we're talking more from the sense of what they deem to be political, which isn't really. When David Tennant's Doctor in the 60th anniversary specials, he gets lectured by Donna and Rose, and they're saying, a female doctor would understand, but you're male, so you can't. And we're
I
saying this is political messaging.
I
What we
nearly
mean is,
threw
it's
I
yeah,
nearly
it's
threw my
ridiculous.
controller at the screen when I saw that.
Mm.
I was just like, I can't believe, because when RTD came back, I already knew there was going to be wokeness in it. But even after telling me to F off, even after blocking me, I was still willing to give his era a chance. I tuned in to the 60th anniversary. Of course I did. In spite of everything lots of people have been saying, because I thought if he can just recapture the magic of his original era, even if it's not quite as good, but if it's somewhat there, it will be such an improvement over everything we've got. And I'm like, it's RTD, it's not going to be as bad as Chibnall, if anything. And I'm not going to lie, my jaw was dropped for the whole episode. I could not believe how in your face it was. For everything from the trans character Rose being dead named or whatever that is, and Donna's mother being brought back seemingly for the sole purpose of being an old person who's out of touch. Why?
Yeah.
Do
And
you know what I
Russell
mean?
inserted himself into the character of Donna, because there's that one scene, and I picked up on it as soon as I saw it, right? Where Donna and Rose go into the house, and Donna says, I will fight to the end of I will fight the entire world to save you, darling. And I thought, that's Russell speaking, rather. He's saying to the audience, if you dare criticize this, I will throw all the backlash your way. And I knew that as soon as I saw that scene. And yeah, and this is another reason, right? When people say you just wanted to hate this, no, the 60th anniversary specials were like made for me and you and people who grew up with that era. We wanted more than anything to enjoy it, right? After 5 years of complete garbage, we were like, right, okay, they've brought all the original people back, all the writers, all the same production team, all the actors are back. Everything was how it was. So there was no reason why it couldn't have been as great as back then. There was nothing stopping them. If anything, they had full reins now. If they wanted it to be that good, then they could have, made it that good. There was nothing stopping them. But they made a deliberate decision to replace it with all their garbage. And I think that's what's so disappointing, is that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't. Like, when they go to make any episode, it could be the greatest thing ever, but they make these decisions that ruin it. And you see that with all these studios, right? Like, the roadmap has been laid out. They have to do this, this, this. They can, they've got this story idea, just follow through with it. But then they'll go, well, we were going to do that, but then we thought if we put this in, it would be much better. It's like, oh, you idiot, you had it all right there. Just, write it that way, do it. But you're not. And it's,
I can't believe that Doctor Who, it has one of the best templates in all of fiction. Man with a police box that can go anywhere in any time, any planet in any galaxy, go, have a story, meet characters, fight monsters, cool monsters, off in the TARDIS, off to next adventure. The fact that these grown people, who are supposedly supposed to have decades of writing experience under their belt, are struggling to do this. The fact that, you could almost go to a primary school, right? Give children pieces of paper and say, write a story, write your own story. We'll put them all together and we'll choose 10 best ones. And I guarantee you would have a better Doctor Who series than anything that has come out the show in 7 years.
Yep.
It baffles me. I have come to the ultimate conclusion that they are doing this on purpose. And it's like I said with my impression of RTD, that smug laugh, oh, the fans are really going to enjoy this. He's doing it on purpose. You won't convince me otherwise. Either that, or he really has just always been this bad, but in the past he's had other people helping him. Maybe he's had ghostwriters, because I just don't, I can't explain the currentness, because I've always said this, right? If the wokeness is in there, it's going to annoy me. But if you've got a good story and good monsters, you can kind of overlook it and just be like, well, it's there, but it was still a great story. You can't do that here
Yeah,
because
because there's
everything's
no
bad.
story there.
No, everything's bad. And listen, I disagree with a lot of the anti-wokers. I am more centrist like you, Golden Age Geek. I don't know how you feel about, I think it's perfectly okay for men to cry. I hate this kind of that everyone has to be an alpha, and it's just, but there's men being able to cry, and then there's taking the piss. And that's what Gap was like,
Yeah.
crying
Every
every
single
single
episode.
episode.
Every
And
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
the slightest thing will set him off. I'm just like, what? The, do you know? I don't know if you remember Green Death when Joe Grant was leaving, and how the doctor just he couldn't stay in the room. He looked away. He took a swig of his drink. He put it down, and he just left. And he quietly drove away in Bessie. Now you looked at him, and you could see he was on the verge of breaking down. That was a heartbreaking moment for him. But he didn't.
Yeah.
He kept it together. He kept it together because that's how a lot of men behave. And it's not because we're insensitive. It's not because we're socially awkward. It's because that is how a lot of us are conditioned to be
Yeah,
like.
I'm like you. I think there's a middle ground to be found. I don't
Exactly.
think that people should be crying all the time. Absolutely not. I think there has to be some sort of emotional intelligence and resilience there. But
Of
I
course.
don't think that people shouldn't be allowed to show emotion. I mean, if you look back to the early seasons of New Who, which, as I said, I still find to be absolutely enjoyable, the 10th Doctor cries a bit. Like in The Girl in the Fireplace, he cried a bit. In Last of the Time Lords, he cried a bit. But it made sense for the story because, in Last of the Time Lords, this was the last of his race, and now he's
Yeah.
been killed, and now he's truly alone. It made sense for why he cried. And it rarely happened. And what made it so good was that, yes, it rarely happened. And then that was good because when it did happen,
It was so
it was
impactful.
rare, so it was impactful. Yeah, exactly. Like in the 11th Doctor, as I've mentioned, he was the most like positive Doctor of them all. There was never any like darkness with him, but then there was sometimes. And in The Name of the Doctor, when Clara brings up, oh, I've been talking to River Song, she's mentioned Tren's Law, and he knows that's his grave, and he sits down, and he's, I think in the previous scene he'd been playing like hide and seek with the children that Clara's been child minding, and he's having this amazing time, and then he just sits in the sofa and he's shedding some tears, and you're like, oh, okay, it's serious now.
I have to say, one of my favorite, I think Matt Smith's peak performance was The Rings of Akaton. I know not many people, some people really don't like that story, but I think the scene where he gives the son, the parasite son, all of his knowledge and it all comes out of him, and you see the tears dripping down his face. That's not him going, where? That's the emotion. That's everything coming out of him. That's everything he's been keeping bottled up. And that's honestly how I am sometimes. I don't cry often. I get upset, but I don't cry often because I can't. It's not that I don't want to, it's just I find myself that I can't until there's one day in, it could be any day, where the slightest thing will just set me off and everything that I've had built up will come out. And I just think, to me, that is so much more real than someone. Gat was crying just looks like it's put on. Like he's some kind of
Yeah.
attention seeker or something. And I'm just like, I look at, and I haven't watched these episodes. I would not do that to myself. But just from the clips I've seen, it's so overdone. It's so overdone. It's juvenile. And it is absolutely bloody stupid. Because this is not the Doctor. This is not the same character. And I thought Tennant crying over Rose was a bit far-fetched, to be honest, because did they not literally just have the conversation in school reunion? And I thought this when I was watching series 2. You can spend the rest of your life with me, but I can't spend the rest of mine with you, so I can't really allow myself to get attached to you like I did Sarah Jane. A few episodes later, are you going to stay with me forever? Oh, good. Let's skip off into the sunset. La-di-da-di-da-di-da. Oh, no, I've lost her. Where? Like, what? Hold on.
Yeah.
Did you not literally just explain to her that this is not going to work? It's like as a romance, it's so inconsistent and it's so juvenile. It's just this is just how I honestly feel about it. So, in terms of the topics we're covering, so it's just the state of the show today. It has really just it's made me look back at the old stuff. And the trouble is, I love Classic Who, but I've seen it so many times. I used to watch a Classic Who
Yeah.
story every night before school. Well, before bed, because you got an hour left, and you don't want to stay up too late. And what I love about Classic Who episodes, they're 24 minutes each. You put on a Classic Who, and it'd just be such a nice little bit of escapism. It honestly used to relax me. But over the years, I've completed my collection. Over the recent years, I've seen the episodes I hadn't seen yet. They were brilliant. Some were absolutely awful, but hey, there you go. That's the beauty of Doctor Who. You get amazing ones, then sometimes you get ones that you can just laugh at. But I honestly just can't bring myself to watch it at the moment. And, I'm trying. I was hoping that this going back and watching RTD's original era would kind of be like, well, I can just stop it after that. I'm not going to lose it. But it really has just soured the whole thing for me. And I'm overjoyed to hear that you've actually been able to separate the two. I think that's wonderful. And I envy you. I wish I could do that right now, because I don't know if you know, but I've just moved into a new house. So, I've set up my bedroom. I've built lots of shelves. I've got all my action figures on the wall. In fact, I might actually show it if I just get the camera over here. So, there we go.
Oh, that's great. I'm always envious of people who have collections like that, because I've never been someone who's collected any sort of action figures or anything. But yeah, seeing that makes me want to.
Yeah, I've got all the RTD figures at the top, all going along there. And got the Classic Who ones coming down here. And then that's on to like some other stuff like horror characters. Got Alien, the Alien Queen, Predator. So, lots of cool stuff. But these people are going to call me a fake fan. No, I've only just spent God knows how much on all this. But
Yeah.
this has honestly just made me feel like, do I want to pack all of that away? Not the Classic Who figures, but do I want to pack all of those RTD figures away when I have such fond memories of sat at the top of my stairs playing Daleks versus Cybermen? It was just the Daleks would always win. And it was just, do I want to pack all that away? Like, I don't think this man who sits on his high horse and looks down at people, talks down to people, and genuinely thinks that he is the gay messiah, I don't think this man realizes what he's done. I don't think. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, as you may know, the finale was shown in cinemas at midnight, because of course it had to be at midnight, didn't it? I mean, it's only a family.
Midnight.
Huh?
What is the obsession with showing it at midnight? It's like you say it's for kids, and then it's not for kids. Make up your mind.
Yeah, the explanation he gave was dumb. He said, kids throughout the years have always gone to midnight showings of things and like midnight signings of books and video game releases. And it's like, yeah, but not like 6-7-year-olds, like maybe like early teens, sure. But yeah, what I was going to say is I saw on TikTok and a few other places that RTD actually went to one of the cinemas in Manchester for the midnight showing, and he was there and he was talking to fans and stuff. And I said this not in a malicious way. I wish I would have known that, because I would have actually gone and I would have actually gone up to him and had a conversation and would have, come across quite, in a civil manner. And I would have said, right, I would like to have a talk to you about all this. And I would have loved to have gotten him just on his own, and without any cameras or without, so he could actually speak his mind. And I would have actually liked to have just got from his perspective why he is doing this, honestly. And then I could have some sort of semblance of where he's coming from, at least.
Do you know what? You are a nice lad, and I dread what he'd have said to you. Don't forget, he told a Christian person that he was a Republican, see you next Tuesday, and to F off. He told a fan, who was making similar complaints, he said, poor baby, poor thing, he's a bully. He is a childish, obsessed, self-obsessed bully who has clearly got serious issues. And I'm telling you, if you'd have sat down in front of him, he'd have done one or two things. He would have attacked you, not physically, but he'd have just, hurled abuse at you and told you to F off, or he'd have probably just toyed with you, told you things that weren't true, or made you trip up on yourself. He just comes across to me as a very nasty human being if you disagree with him. And his
Yeah.
definition of disagreeing with him is criticizing his writing. A fan in Canada, I don't know if you're aware of this, but a fan in Canada wasn't even criticizing. All the fans said on Instagram was, "Hey, how come us in Canada can't watch what was it called again? The Doctor Who Unleashed."
Yeah.
Oh, the TARDIS,
Oh, Tales of the TARDIS.
Tales of the TARDIS. That's it. And that's all. He's just asking, "Hey, how come we can't get it?" Do you know what Russell did? He blocked him. This is what Problem Beings told me, so don't take me as gospel, but this is what I've been told. Apparently, he blocked a fan just for saying, "Hey, how comes I can't watch it?" This is a fan who wants to watch your stuff, Russell.
Hmm.
I mean, it just begs belief. Like, I just do not understand. Like, I've said this, right, and maybe I was being a little bit too generous. I said that maybe how I worded my comment on his Instagram could have been better because I did come across as very aggressive. I've had people say, "No, you just gave him advice," but it's like, no, I do think I could have worded it better. I like to be civilized, like you. I wish I'd been more civilized, but honestly, I don't think the response would have been any different because I just think
Hmm.
he's that up his own arse. I think he is doing this on purpose. He wants fans like me gone. And I'm not even a political person. I honestly, I just want good Doctor Who. But this man
Yeah.
can't take any criticism. So it's like
Yeah.
you either like what I do or you go away. It's like that's not. And Nicholas Briggs is the same. He's been the same on Big Finish. People have criticised his work. He rallied people up to go and attack them. Stephen Moffat is the same, and that's what I mean. The Fitzroy group, they are all the same. They're like a cult. They're like a group of people who are all sensitive. None of them can take criticism.
Yeah,
People.
and that I think that's the most ironic thing, right? All the Fitzroy crowd talk about is change and we need to, make progress and stuff. But for a group of people that talk about change and just changing the fabric of Doctor Who, but not only that, society, they seem to like keep the power very close to them, right, and keep on passing it around. So it went from Russell to Moffat to Chibnall back to Russell, and they don't really
Exactly.
seem to want any other creative input. So
And if
they
anyone,
talk about change, but they don't want any change because nothing's changed because they keep
no,
on just keeping that little tight circle, and they just gatekeep anyone else.
and I'm telling you, if I see, I don't know what's going to happen to the rights of this show. I don't know if when this show inevitably gets cancelled, who's going to own it? Is the BBC going to get it stored away in their archives? Is Bad Wolf going to get it? Is Disney, God forbid, going to get it? Who's going to own it? Is Russell T Davies, has he bought this show? Is it his now, whether anyone likes it or not? Because I tell you, if that's the case, this show is never coming back. It's
I
done.
mean, I don't know who. I think it's split up across multiple people, right? So the BBC had it, but even they've never really like had all the rights. Like the rights to the TARDIS, Daleks, they're all different people own those. But for the most part, the BBC have owned Doctor Who. But then it was bought by Bad Wolf, which was bought by Sony, which was then partly bought by Disney. So I have no clue who
It's
has like
just
the
it's
largest.
just a big mess. It's going to make it because we remember the TV movie that there was licensing issues with that. That nearly made the show not able to come back in 2005. It just when things get passed around between all of these different, it just really complicates the situation. And the Daleks, I think you can blame the state of them, not just on the writers, but on the fact that the Terry Nation estate have clearly got a contract that is forcing them to be used every year. To which, if I was taking over the show, me and you should get together and take it over in like 10 years. But if I was, I would go straight up to them and I would be like, guys, listen to me. We're going to sign a contract with you, but we will not be using the sodding things every year. Do you want
But
your
is
father?
that an actual thing though, or is it a myth? Because
Well,
they haven't
it's
been shown like this year, and it seems in the Christmas special they're not going to be in it either. So that would be a year which they haven't been in.
well, they were in the last year. They appeared in the ruins of Skaro. So I would say this year they might appear. See, what they did was, if you remember the specials in 2009, the Daleks didn't appear in a story, but there was a brief cameo in the waters of Mars. And I think what it is if the Daleks appear even in the slightest way, that technically counts. It just
So
seems to
they
me
could do
like,
like a flashback or something.
yes. And if we remember, there was something in the Chibnall, because in the Chibnall era, every Christmas special was a Dalek story. And that was his way of kind of
Oh,
using them.
not a Christmas special, Jack. It was a New Year's
Oh, I'm
special because
sorry. Yeah, we have to
Chibnall did
accommodate
not like
for
Christmas.
others. We have to accommodate for others who've come here and stolen our culture. Yeah, sorry. Happy Day, we'll call it, or whatever. But yeah, oh, I honestly think that it is a myth, but I think if you put two and two together, it's bloody obvious. But I would ensure that, the Daleks are used when they are needed and not being forced to, because when you use them too many times, they lose their effect. But that's just a whole nother thing. So PD has also said in the chat, he also banned Pete Mateague from making any more classic Doctor Who promo videos. And do you know why that was? Because that promo video was better than anything that has come out of the show in 10 years. And Russell T Davies didn't like that. He doesn't like being upstaged. I don't know if you've ever known someone at school, or you've known someone at work, even a teacher, where you say something and you unintentionally absolutely scold them, and they are really horrible to you for the rest of the day because they know that you've just made them look bad. That's RTD. He's so insecure. He can't stand the idea of someone else being better than him. That's the only conclusion I can come to.
Yeah, and the reason I said, and of course you told me how that interaction would have gone, but the reason I said I would have loved to have had a conversation with RTD is because this transcends political messaging and his own beliefs or whatever. Just his basic skill to write a story he just doesn't possess anymore. I mean, some of the episodes this season, I think he said in one of the Doctor Who Unleashed episodes, I could be wrong, but someone told me about this, like 73 yards, right? I don't know if you know about that episode, but it ended abruptly. There was no answers, and he just said, like, make it up in your head, right? And I think it was written somewhere that he said he wanted to sort of destroy the 3-part structure of a story. So he didn't want to do a beginning, middle, end. He wanted to do his own thing. And so his ability to just write a coherent story is just gone. So I wanted to, because of course, if I went up to him and said, "Oh, why do you believe this?" Part of me, I don't really have the right to say that. He's allowed to believe whatever he wants to believe. But I just wanted to question just the entire sort of premise of these stories and how they came to be, because I just don't think that what should be a skilled writer has produced this, and it's so discombobulated and it's a mess, and things don't make sense, nothing's answered. I mean, I know you haven't seen Empire of Death, but if you did see that, you'd be like beyond confused. I mean,
I haven't seen the episodes, but I've seen the streams, and people have described the plot, well, what or lack of, in explicit detail. So I know the sort of rough ins and outs of the story. But yeah, it just seems to me like he spent the episode building and building, and people were like, "Oh, this is actually really good," and then the ending just didn't happen, and people were like, "Well, what was the point of all that then?"
And what's great is that even the shills are starting to turn on him. The most famous one, won't say the name here, did a video and said, like, this was a mess. This didn't make any sense. Something needs to change. And that's what's good. If those people that have been loyal to RTD are starting to speak out, good. That needs to happen. That needs to happen more.
Well, it's wonderful, isn't it? Because it's funny. For the first time in God knows how long, this might actually bring the fandom together.
Yeah, because even RTD said they haven't been commissioned for a 3rd season yet. So if the ratings continue to go down and down, and they've been the worst in the show's history, if they continue to get worse, then maybe, just maybe, we can cancel this show. And which is, it pains me to say that because I love Doctor Who, but I think what needs to happen is it needs to, remain dead for about 10 or so years. Then we need completely new leadership, get the old Fitzroy crowd out. We need
Out,
new
yeah.
people there. We need a new vision.
Yeah, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's my dream to be involved in it in some way, and I'm sure it's
Yeah,
every
and
fan's dream.
that's what I've been doing for the past like month or so. I've actually been writing scripts
Oh
of
well,
what a season I would do. I've been doing it like how they did back in the day with New Who. I've got 13 episodes. I've been writing scripts. I've been, using all sorts of like music creators to create my own like soundtrack and been putting designs together for things, and eventually in like a year or however long it takes, because I want it to be as high quality as possible, I want to have like 13 episodes, great scripts there, and I would it would be an absolute dream to actually run. I know the chances of that are slimmer than slim, but there's always a part of you that hopes. But if I can't do it officially, I'd like to get together and do like an animated series of all
absolutely.
these stories, and I can
And you
absolutely
know
do that. Of
what?
course, I won't be able to monetize it because Doctor's protected
No,
property,
no, no.
but I
But
wouldn't want to do that. I would just like to, because I think what makes me most sad is that I know people have their criticisms of RTD's first era, especially if they watched Classic Who first, but watching those first 4 seasons was just pure magic, and it's what got me into storytelling. It's what got me into all this stuff. And the people nowadays, these young children, they won't be able to have that because these things are just that garbage. Even these younger people aren't watching it, and if they do, they're criticizing it. I want them to be able to watch something and go, this inspires me, and they haven't got that. So that's what I want to bring to the table.
well, you heard it here first, folks. New. It's going to be ironic that he telling me to f off is like me, Golden Age. We're gonna be bringing it back. So,
Yeah.
I've always said the perfect thing to do would be a nice combination of RTD's original era and Classic Who. If you could find like a perfect balance between the two, I'd like that would
Yeah,
be the best way to do it.
because as you mentioned, there are many Classic Who, fans and loyalists, and that's absolutely fine. Classic Who's amazing, but I also do like some of the things that New Who introduced that weren't in Classic Who. Like, for example, I don't disagree completely with RCD's characterization of the Doctor. I think, in Classic Who, it was great because he was this quirky alien that wasn't sort of grounded by all the things that, affect us. But I don't think it's totally out of the picture to have the Doctor be perhaps a little bit more emotional, perhaps have some sort of story or
Yeah.
arc or something
No,
like that. I
one
don't
thing I
think he
will
should
say,
just be this character that moves from one story to the next. I
yes,
do like the idea of a season arc. I like the idea of what New Who did with sort of giving the companions a bit more of a backstory and going into a bit more of their lives. I think it's gone too much in that direction, but I think there should be a middle ground. I think both series have done very different things. If you bring them together, you could be able to create something great.
if you had the characterization and the fleshed out characters, because that was RTD's strength, was characters. He like Jackie Tyler and all that. He knew how to flesh them out. And I was having this conversation with Problem Being, and if you had the creativeness, the monsters and the scenarios and the sort of, the vision of Classic Who, but you combine that with the wonderful, more in depth and very uh, I'm not sure how to describe it, very fleshed out storytelling of, a few of New Who before it got silly. I think you would have something truly special. And I do agree with you, actually. I think the Doctor could often come across as quite emotionless in Classic Who, but a lot of people like that because they think it made him more alien. I think it's nice for the Doctor to have some sort of relatability, but also there should be that alien factor there because he's not human. He's not supposed to be like Gatwa, where he's just obsessed over all the current trends and the stupidness that we're into now. It's like, no, the Doctor wouldn't even, he'd be like, God, you people are going through a phase, aren't you? It's like, I
Yeah,
think
I
if you,
think the way Moffat characterized his Doctors, I think, is the baseline. I think that's what should happen in in another series going forth, because they did have that alienness to them, and the way Moffat did it, he kind of made the Doctor a wizard sort of opening the doors to a magical world. That's kind of how it was presented with his doctors, and I think that was great. But again, you did have those moments where he was a bit more human, but you didn't see him as a human. He was still an alien. So again, there's a balance there that that should be found.
Yeah, and it, as I say, I know what you mean. You are upset that you have to say we want Doctor Who cancelled, but for me, it's just, it will make me feel so much better. Like, it's almost anxiety causing that the show is still going in the state it's in, because you want it to, at least if it's cancelled, it's put out of its misery. Do you know what I mean? And then, hopefully
Yeah.
in time it can heal and stand a chance of coming back. But the trouble is that the longer it keeps going, the more damage is going to be inflicted, and for every episode that goes out means less likelihood of it coming back, because every episode just seems to destroy something else. Like Sutek, you took the coolest, aesthetically, you took the most coolest and scariest and most well-known villain, and you just butchered him. I must admit, I haven't been a fan of some of RTD's redesigns. I never liked the new series Sontarans. I always preferred the classic ones,
Yeah.
which is why I was actually quite surprised when I saw Chibnall's design. I was like, oh, that's better. I'll give him credit for that. The Lumix Cybermen, I like them. I do think they have a charm to them. I think they get a bit too much hate, but I hate the stomping. I think that's,
Yeah, they became too much like Iron Man.
Yes. Oh no, that was the Moffat ones. When I saw that Nightmare in Silver promo, I was like,
yeah.
that's like a plastic Iron Man action figure, and I hated it. I
Yeah,
think they
and
should always.
oh, sorry, I was gone.
No,
I'll
go on.
let you finish. Sorry.
No, I was just saying that I think they should always have a sort of human element. And what I loved about the Cyber Controller was that you could see the brain. I love that. You had those lights in there as well, so you could highlight it. So, and they had a sort of, I don't know if it was the way they were painted or the way they lit, but they really did look like they were made of metal, whereas Moffat's Cybermen just looked like they were made of plastic.
Yeah. Now, I was going to say, you said you love the Daleks, and for me, I've always been the same, but with the not sometimes Cybermen, which is why I love Capaldi's episodes. Very mixed bag, right? Some were absolutely rubbish, some were absolutely amazing. I think if he had a more consistent era, he would have been my favorite Doctor. But the one episode I absolutely adore is World Enough in Time, because that episode really made the Cybermen scary and eerie again. Because as you said, the Cybermen up until that point in New Who were sort of these plastic, creatures that you didn't really feel like, oh, that's like mushed up humans in there or whatever, right? But with World Enough in Time, when Bill goes into that like hospital and she's seeing all the patients that are going to be turned into Cybermen, and the volume's down on their like speakers, and she turns it up and they're like, yeah, kill me now, and you're like, oh god, this is, you really felt the horror in that, and you got all the you saw all the the surgeries going on to convert them into Cybermen. You saw the elements of the body horror there. That's what they should be.
I loved how it wasn't just a silly machine. There was actually like a mad scientist looking guy with like scalpels and syringes and like, shall we begin? I was like, oh, that's good. Like, this is what I've always wanted to see. I've always wanted them to do a prequel to 10th Planet, and
Mondas.
go to Mondas and see, the actual, but I know that would be far too much, because the body horror, it would be, children wouldn't be able to watch that, which is why I hate Torchwood Cyberwoman, because there is so much potential in that story. You got the body horror, you got the sort of thing, but you had to make her look like a bloody stripper. It's like they had so much potential. Look, a Torchwood is I could do a whole nother video on that, and just how
Torchwood
much
Torchwood was a mixed bag. There's some bits I like. I like the idea of, of course Doctor Who wouldn't, fit this, but with Torchwood it being a different show, it does. I like the idea of like an organization on Earth that deals like a spy organization that deals with all this alien stuff. I like the general premise of Torchwood. There were some episodes that I loved, like Countryside was that is like
That's
that's
a
the
good
best thing
one.
that Chibnall's ever done, I think.
Lee said the same thing when we watched it. He said that's surprised me that Chibnall wrote that. It's like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
really
because you're
good.
led to believe throughout this whole story that there are these aliens in the countryside that are killing all these people, and it turns out to be these cannibals. And there's that one scene at the end when Gwen goes, "Just tell me, why did you do it?" And he whispers
It
into her
makes
ear,
me
"Because
happy.
it, yeah, no, I think he said like because it makes me smile or something like that." And that was that was great, but Chibnall got whacked over the head or something later down the line. Children of Earth was a very good story. I think Miracle Day is yeah.
Yeah.
Where was we on Cybermen? Oh yeah, I've actually integrated my sort of love for the Cybermen and the body horror type aspects to it. I've actually integrated that into a story I'm doing in my series, which this is why it makes me so sad that these creative hacks are given all this money and all these resources to do all these stories, and they just produce absolute garbage. Because I've actually got these great stories, which I don't mean to sound like an egotist like Russell, but I genuinely think it's an amazing story that if it got given the chance and they actually ditched all the rubbish that RCD's feeding them with and like looked at my story and realized that this is a much darker story, we're not going to be lecturing people, it's going to like mentally scar them, it's going to stay in their minds. I I just love that to come to life.
Well, there's nothing wrong with believing in your work.
Yeah,
So
and so yeah, again, I going back to our original point, there's a balance to be found, but I think we need the show to go under for about 10 or so years, come back with a new vision, get rid of all the previous people that have been holding it down for however many years, and actually
and can we get
get
someone else to do the Dalek voices, please? Because look, Nick, you've done a great job, but I'm getting so bored of you. You know what I mean? Do you remember
yeah,
how in Classic Who the Daleks' voices used to change? So
yeah.
just something different, please. So yeah, it's like I would go out of my way actually to if I was running the show and a fan at a convention said like, "Hey, will any of the old ones run it again?" It's like, they will never be allowed anywhere near this show as long as it's under me. You know, I'm I'm sorry, but not a single one of them. It's like, guys, you've had your turn, right? Stop hogging the toys. It's someone else's turn, right? And you guys destroyed your own legacy. We didn't, right? You guys did. You guys, if you'd have had your eras and moved on, you'd have been well remembered. But no, you had to come back and do what you did now, and now you've just if you're wondering what you're going to be remembered for, Russell, as the man who brought Doctor Who back or the man who completely destroyed it, you're going to be remembered as the guy who just royally effed it up. And
Yeah, and this
you did
previous
that.
season, it's just been a bunch of repurposed nonsense. So if anyone makes the idea of, oh well, maybe they have new ideas, Russell's had the chance to come up with new ideas for 14 years, and he's just come back and he's ripped off his previous work but made it worse. There's really been nothing new. Every single episode this season, you could look to and say, right, that was taken from this story. And like 73 Yards, the basic premise was taken from Sarah Jane Adventures with the Curse of Clyde Langer. If you look at say a story, what can we say, like Space Babies, you can kind of see elements of like World War III and Aliens of London in that.
Mm.
You could look at any episode and you can see bits and pieces. Rogue, it's basically a Captain Jack ripoff in Rogue. Rogue is literally a Captain Jack Harkness ripoff. He is sort of a basic bounty hunter, a bit like a time agent. He's
I have
traveling in his ship. He's doing all this. It's basically a ripoff.
Yeah, I have to. I've just thought there was a skit I came up with actually for the Fitzroy group when they'd come together to meet in the writers' room. Russell T Davies would take the register, a bit like a teacher would to the rest of the class. And I had this idea that Nick Briggs would always talk through the voice modulator. So it would go something like this. It'd be like, "Okay, Moffat, here, Chibnall, here, Nick, here, put that fucking microphone away before I take it away." Just Oh, I could have so much fun just doing skits of these guys, honestly. Because
Yeah,
it's
I've tried to perfect an RTD impression. I'm not going to do it here, but what I've noticed is he loves to use the word absolutely.
oh,
Loves to use that
do you mean the
word.
one? Do you mean the one where he goes? He's just with Davros. He's just like, I say this is what Davros looks like now, and that we are absolutely standing by. Thought it was
Yeah.
absolutely vital to do this, and I'm so proud of the fact that we have.
This guy, right, who's saying that we cannot, which is ridiculous. Davros, the fact that he was in Doctor and he was on the screen associates disability with evil. No one ever thought of that. But this is a guy, right, who reintroduced Davros as being in his life support system. He had John Lumick in his life support system. He had Max Capricorn in his life support system. It seems Russell was the one with a problem against people in things that look like wheelchairs.
Yeah, and is everyone going to forget how he seems to hate fat people? I mean, the Slovene, the adipose. Anyone going to bring that up? No. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just and someone brought this up the other day on a stream, and I was thinking about it. For a guy who talks about we need to destroy stereotypes, right? We need to, get
Russell.
rid of all this, but Gatwa is literally a stereotypical gay man, how he's written him in the show. And the toy maker, he made him have a German accent for the entire episode. Isn't that being rude against German people? You're
I'm sorry, but
associating them with those evil people.
they go on about the racism of the celestial toy maker, right?
What
Because
an absolute bunch of nonsense!
it's
Yeah.
cultural appropriation. And then the very next week announce a Blu-ray release for the original.
Yeah.
So,
And,
so you're
how he
okay,
said
you're okay.
the reason why Gatwa has a Sonic TV remote is because the Sonic screwdriver looked too much like a gun. Absolute nonsense.
What's the matter?
And then
he's going to hold the Sonic sideways.
yeah, and what Russell did right is he said the Sonic screwdriver looked too much like a gun. But anyway, now we're releasing the 14th Doctor Sonic again, but in gold. So make sure to go buy this.
Oh, so the bling, he's got the stereotypical bling, has he? I mean, it could be worse. Honest to God, I thought that the theme tune was going to be hip hop. I honestly did. I thought it was going to be ooh-wee. I was preparing for it, So I mean, not that what they're using is any better. It's like Murray Gold's having an asthma attack. It's like it's like okay.
There have been, I mean, Murray Gold back in 2005 onwards. He had some absolute stellar scores and music put out there, but and he still has this season. It's just they've been very few and far between. There's only 3 memorable pieces of music that I go right. That is god tier, but everything else is. It's more atmospheric than it is sort of like standout. And
I can memorize almost every track from series 1, because they're so good. My favorite is when Eccleston's taking the TARDIS out of Rose, and you've just got that wonderful the lady who does and I'm not going to impersonate it because I'll ruin it, but and you've got the piano, you've got the violins, and it's wonderful. It gives me goosebumps. And then you have Eccleston's regeneration, which is my personal favorite regeneration. It's not dragged out, it's not drawn out, it's got wonderful music, and it honestly brings a tear to my eye every time I watch it.
Yeah, and also, Eccleston's is arguably the best. My favorite is Smith's regeneration into Capaldi, just because I think after Tennant, who treated it as when I regenerate, I die and another person takes my place, which is not really how regeneration works. I appreciate how Matt Smith's Doctor said we all change as we grow up, and it's good to accept that and not to look back, but to look forward, and not to look back on the past and sort of weep about it or cry, but to accept that it was a part of us, but now we're a bit different. I appreciate that different outlook on it.
No, it's a good message. And that's what I mean when he changed. I didn't want him to go. Like I say so many years. 3 years is a long time when you're a child, but it's like I spent such a long time not liking him, and then I got to like him, and then he left. And I was like, oh, here we go again. But that was almost like a part of the fun with it, because I've been rewatching all the James Bond films, and James Bond has been changing you know, from actor to actor. It's almost I made a joke. It's almost like he regenerates. You know,
Yeah.
becomes he's still the same character, but every actor that plays him brings something unique to the table, and that's honestly been what it's like. But you know, when you're a kid, I mean, Matt Smith only really stayed for 3 years, but 3 years is a long time when you're young. But when you think about it, his era really did. It went in a heartbeat, really. And I always wondered why he didn't stay longer. You know, maybe he was fed up with Moffat's crap writing, but you know, as I say, that's just my opinion. So to kind of summarize, I think we both agree that you know what has gone on to recently with Doctor Who has really affected the past. Although you've been much more resistant and can actually go back and enjoy the older stuff, which is wonderful. Whereas me, I don't
Yeah.
know if it's just growing pains. Maybe it's because I'm changing and I don't want to. It does
And
suck, and it's just made it feel very, very different for me.
and as you mentioned, it's also important that you don't sort of go too far to the other side and look at everything as being malicious or forcing some political message. Like, for example, if you were to go into Name of the Doctor without any previous context, right, and you saw how much Stephen Moffat made Clara important, so she goes into his time stream. He's well, no, she's been a part of all these different key events in the Doctor's life. You would look at that and look at today's entertainment and go, "Oh, right, well, that's another example of Clara being a girl boss." You know, she's that stereotypical girl who's the key to everything. She's so important. She's taken over the male lead role. But it wasn't done for that intention because I believe Stephen Moffat only had Jenna Coleman signed on for the 50th. He didn't have Matt Smith or David Tennant or anyone like that. So the reason he made her so important wasn't because he was trying to preach this idea of, oh, women are more important than men. It was because she at the time was the only person who was going to be in it, so he needed to give her some level of importance. So again, it's key to remember the context behind some of these decisions, which is
I
why, you know, we're criticizing RTD because he's openly come out and said, right, well, we want to piss off the old fans, right? But
mm.
it's good to take everything and don't just go down the path of, oh, well, this is another piece of woke garbage. It's key to look at everything as objectively as possible.
Absolutely, and thanks for telling me that because I actually never knew that. And I remember that really frustrating me at the time. You
Hmm.
know, even though I didn't mind Clara particularly, but I just thought, oh, is she really the key to all that? I didn't like that as a kid, and back then I didn't know what all the girl boss stuff and the feminism. I didn't have a clue, you know. But I just remember not liking that at the time. But I didn't know that you know he wasn't sure who
Hmm.
was going to be signed on or not. So that's really good insight. But I think with RTD, you know, it's like Gatwa. I Before Doctor Who aired, I kept telling myself, in spite of everything he said, maybe he's a nice guy. And every time I'd be like, yeah, I'm sure he's nice. He'd come out and say something else stupid. You know, it's like these
Yeah.
people, that there is no excuse. Like whether Doctor Who was great or not, that the things they came out and said, like I often wonder if that whole Davros minisode hadn't come out, would the ratings for the anniversary have been higher? You know, did that make a lot of
Perhaps,
fans
but
take one
it
look at that and go, "No, I'm out"?
perhaps, but you could also say that that special kind of prepared everyone because if we hadn't had all the interviews and we didn't know what was coming, and then you had like the pronoun scene, perhaps it would have hit people even harder, and then they would have still dropped out afterwards. Because remember, every single one of those specials did something like Wild Blue Yonder, Ray swapped Isaac Newton, and David Tennant basically said he's gay in that one.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so
But I'm saying, when with the Star Beast, I think if I remember, just over 6 million tuned in thereabouts. I'm saying if we hadn't have had the interviews, if we hadn't have had that minisode, would much more people have turned up? Would it have got like 8 to 9 million views, maybe? Because everyone heard Tennant was coming back.
I think it would have been a little bit higher. I think those 5 years would have still have caused a lot of the audience to drop out. But I think a lot of people would have, well, a lot more people would have tuned in because everyone nowadays in some way, shape, or form is on social media or, you know, is on a place which allows them to connect with all the news and what people are saying. So I think a lot of people did see those comments. So, yeah, I think it's fair to say that a fair few more people would have watched the specials.
Yeah, and
The only person the only person that I feel sorry for in this whole sort of situation, like Shooty Gatsworth hasn't helps himself out in any respects. You know, he's piled onto a lot of the fans are toxic
Yeah.
conversation. But Millie Gibson, like she is the one person in this past season. She played the companion Ruby Sunday. I thought she was amazing. Her acting was great. I think she was kind of held back in a lot of regards because of Russell's scripts. So I feel sorry for her because she was amazing, and in a better era of Doctor Who would have been a solid companion. And I don't think, well, maybe she has, but I don't remember her coming out and saying anything about toxic fans or anything like that.
She
Actually,
did.
if
She
you,
did at
oh,
one
did she?
point. Yes. It wasn't. It was. She didn't attack anyone, but she came out and she said this series is going to be very different and it's going to annoy a lot of people, and that's good, or
Oh
something.
yeah, I think I made a video on that. Yeah,
Yeah, and that put me off her straight away. She seems like a nice person, and I will say apparently she is good in Coronation Street, but I don't watch that show. But the problem with her character is I am just getting so sick of these modern 21st century women. It would be so nice if we had a character like
yeah,
Victoria Waterfield, but of course you can't because then the whole feminist argument would come into it. And it's like if you
yeah,
try and represent women from any other period in history, they've got to be girl bosses, because if you represent them accurately, you're then gonna get lots of flack from people complaining, oh, well, why is she doing everything the doctor said? Why is she being so naturally feminine? All this stuff. It's just, it's ridiculous. And it's not that I thought Millie Gibson was a bad actress, but I just didn't like her very much. I didn't like this modern kind of, yo, doctor, what's that? And just she just looked very annoying to me. But as I
yeah. A
say, I
lot of
can't definitively say anything because I haven't watched the episodes. You have, so
yeah,
I'm going to go by what you're saying.
a lot of the New Who companions. There's slight differences, between them, but for the most part they're the same because, as you said, they're all from modern day.
Yeah,
Which is why I think that Victorian Clara would have been a far superior companion. I think what Doctor Who needs to do is either get companions from different time periods, so perhaps one person from the future, perhaps
well,
another one from the
Captain Jack
distant
was from the
past.
future.
Yeah, or do a different species and you bring that into it. I think what Classic Who did so great is that the companions did vary a lot.
Yeah, it was wonderful because back then they didn't have to worry, oh, are we going to offend anyone? But it's like if you just keep using the same template over and over again, people are just going to get bored.
I think
So
Russell said in the most recent Unleashed episode, again, I could be misremembering or something, but I think I remember him saying something like, one of the key things that he considers when writing an episode is what the social media response is going to be. So
that's
when
the problem.
someone in the interview talked about, oh, you're setting up all these threads, do you worry that perhaps you're not writing a clear story? Do you think people might be a bit confused? And he said, well, no, because I assume that if I write something, people are going to just go off and talk about it, so I don't have to do as much work.
Yeah, Russell, could you come here a moment? Yes, what is it? You're fired. It's like, I'm sorry. Does anyone? It's like I see so many Doctor Who fans, going on these big conversations. Oh, has Russell still got it or hasn't he? The answer's no, and you bloody well know it. It's like, are we
Yeah, like
still
even
talking about
me,
this?
who passionately defended Boom, and I still think that's like a 7 out of 10 episode, right? Even I said that it was written by Moffat, but I said it wasn't written by Moffat in his prime. That Boom, as soon as I finished watching Boom, I compared it instantly to a story of his from season 10, which is very much when Moffat was past his prime and a lot of the stories were quite low in quality. So I said, it felt like Moffat, but it didn't feel like the best of Moffat. So
Mm.
I did admit that, and I think I'm pretty accurate when I say that. So all these writers now, what they're writing is not up to standard.
I will say I was thinking of checking that one out, but when I heard about the whole attack on faith thing, now look, I'm not here to tell anyone what they should think or anything, but I'm a spiritual, not religious person, and even though I accept Doctor Who as a science fiction show, I know that there are characters like Azal, who's a demon, Sutek, who is were meant to be the embodiment of Satan, but it's an
Yeah,
alien. I
I've
love
always been of
things
this
like that.
view that I don't really agree with genres. I
Mm,
think that like when people say Doctor Who's a science fiction show, it shouldn't be a fantasy. I'm thinking, well, let's look at that for a moment because like I think sci-fi and fantasy, they're the same thing. It's just a matter of perspective. What some people may call like someone apparating in fiction, someone will say that's teleportation in science fiction. What someone may say is like like telekinesis, someone may come up with a scientific explanation or something like that. I think it's a matter of perspective. If you come across a flying alien, someone in fantasy may say that's a dragon, but in
mm.
science fiction, you may say, oh, that's a different species. So I think sci-fi and fantasy are not different at all. It's all a matter of perspective.
No, absolutely. But one of the things I think Doctor Who did well was it took a concept like the devil and a demon, and it brought a sort of sciencey element to it. Like Sutek. He's a siren. He's like Horus, and them being like jackals are not just sculptures that human beings have invented. They're actually based on an alien species. And it's like, did they build the pyramids and stuff like that? And it's really cool, and it's very. But when RTD does something like, oh, it's a fairy ring with real fairies, do,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah. If you're going to do something that does come across a bit fantasy-like, you still have to provide enough lore and rules there for it to make sense. Like one of the key problems I had with 73 Yards was that there's this mysterious woman who we find out later is older Ruby, and she says something to everyone that makes them run away from Ruby in fear, right? And Russell said, "You're never going to find out. Make it up yourself." And I'm thinking, well, you need to provide the audience with some answers. And the Empire of Death. What was it? The Doctor says, memory. No, time is a memory, so memory is a time machine. I thought, what does that mean? And throughout the whole season, it's been snowing around Ruby, and all these things have been happening. Maestro could detect a hidden song within her soul. That was never answered. And people came up to me and they said, well, there was an explanation. I'm thinking, okay, let's take what the explanation was. The Doctor said that Ruby thought her mum was special and she was this sort of larger than life person, so she was. That's not an explanation. That's a cop out. You can't say, oh, a character thought this, so it came to being and it makes sense. It doesn't. That's a bunch of nonsense. An explanation has to make sense. How does the story get resolved? So Sutek brings this dust of death and it kills all life in the universe at every point in time. And the way they resolve it is by putting a lead on him and forcing him to scratch the time vortex, which brings death to death, resulting in life. What does that mean? That makes no sense. He says, Sutek, what if you bring death to death? You bring life. No, they're all dead.
Apologies for the crying child, if anyone can hear it. No, it's so typical of Russell because he interpreted the whole "where I tread, I leave nothing but dust and darkness." Of course, he interprets that as literal dust. It's like what he said was he was going to destroy everything. And also, what is with this design? Once again, it's like touching into Russell T Davis's awful designs. Where are his legs? He looks like one of those Halloween props you could buy from Asda back in the 2000s. It would have a head, arms, and a hook, and the body would just be like cloth. I'm just like, what?
Yeah, he said in the episode, the Doctor said that the reason Sutek doesn't look like the way he did was because of apparently the original design was an example of cultural appropriation.
Yeah, and
he said those two words.
That was the moment, I think, where I just realized that as long as this man is involved in anything, it's not going to be good. So in 1 year, he has managed to destroy the Doctor, Davros, the Toymaker, Sutek, and am I missing anything else? As another design, he's ballsed up because, we don't want to offend anyone.
And this was the guy who said, this is a reboot of sorts. You don't need to know anything from before. But hang on a minute. We're going to bring back Davros. We're going to bring back Sutek. We're going to bring back the Toymaker.
Yeah, he's like...
And I don't know if you're aware of this. In the penultimate episode, when Susan gets mentioned, his granddaughter, Kate has a conversation with the Doctor and she says, my father always used to tell me about all these things, all these adventures, all these people you knew, but he never talked about a granddaughter. And Kate says, well, if you have a granddaughter, that means you have children. The doctor says, and this is law breaking. Again, this is him breaking the canon. The doctor said, or the doctor says in that scene, just because I have granddaughter doesn't mean I have children. I'm a Time Lord. I live out of order. Maybe I'll have kids in the future. And I'm thinking, no, the doctor has said before
Oh,
in the show that he's had kids and he's implied that they died. This whole, again, it's Russell trying to make his
in
mark
his
on Doctor
era,
history. Yeah,
in
exactly.
his
Yeah, in the
original
Doctor's
era.
daughter, he talked about it. Yeah.
No, and in Fear Her, you know, I can understand why people don't remember because it's Fear Her. But when Rose is like, you know, a kid going on about kids and how irritating they are, the doctor was like, I was a dad once. And she goes, what did you say? It's like, yeah, I was a dad once and I'm dating a 19-year-old now. It's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I hate. No, it just goes to show, right? Anyone who is using the argument that Russell cares about this show, he doesn't even care enough to go back and watch his and take references from his original stuff because he's just. I think you're right, Golden Age Geek. I think the real Russell's been dumped in a ditch somewhere. This is a pod
And
person.
when he did the audio commentary for the church on Ruby Road, when Ruby goes into the TARDIS, she walks out and she walks around it, right, to make sure, oh, wait, is it really this small on the outside? He said that Rose, I think he said Rose. Rose was the only companion to do that. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, Donna did that in The Runaway Bride. Clara did that in The Snowman. So that's a lie right there. Rose wasn't the only one that checked for any traps on the outside or anything. So again,
Martha did.
he doesn't know.
No, I just don't get it. But I think to ultimately summarize this video, it's just he doesn't care. So why should we? You know, why should we?
Yeah.
And that's how I feel. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've been saying this quite a bit. A part of me regrets becoming a fan of this show. But then again, if I'd have become a fan, like a hardcore Star Wars fan, I'd probably be feeling the same because
Yeah.
everything's been ruined. Absolutely everything. And you know, I feel like we're in a time in the world where we really need this kind of stuff. And these people just seem hell-bent on taking it from us. And you know, David Tennant, the 10th Doctor, he was my Doctor. I mean, look at my emblem, look at my avatar.
Yeah.
That's a piece of artwork I did for. I actually gave him this artwork. I met him back in Telford Comic Con in 2022, and I was really nervous because I was always like, you know, you can have a bad experience with meeting a celebrity, and that can really kind of throw off your opinion. I had such a great day. I met Paul McGann. He was an absolute legend. I loved him. I met Catherine Tate. She was lovely. She gave me a free autograph because I drew her some artwork. And let me tell you this, she actually took the time to get up from behind the table and come round to have a chat with me. That's how lovely she is. That's how genuine she is. And Tennant, when
Yeah.
I gave him the drawing, he ran round the room and started showing because I was getting my photo taken with him. He started showing other people and even the photographer ladies, like, look at this, you know. And it was such a great experience. And now I can't even bear to look at the man. And it's not because I am political. It's not because I, you know, hate people who are on the left or disagree. You know, it's like, oh, he disagrees with me, therefore I don't like him. This whole issue and I didn't really want to go into this too much, but I know other people are going to at some point. So I'm going to say my piece on it. This whole trans issue, as far as I am concerned, what you do with your body is your choice, as long as you are aware of the damage you could potentially do, you know, the whole putting petrol in a diesel tank. But for God's sake, don't start putting this in front of children. Because look, I went to a Catholic school, all right, so the things like sexual education was very lacking. And I went through a time when I was very confused. And I only had two genders to contend with. You know, so you look at the thousands of them that exist today, and you just think, what must those poor kids go through when they have got these people whispering God knows what in their ear? You know, if you could become an adult and you come to your own conclusion of what you are, that is your business. As long as you don't force your lifestyle on everyone else, that is fine. Look, I know what it's like to be different. You know, I'm on the autistic spectrum. I've been open about this. I'm only just discovering things about myself now that make sense why maybe I didn't get on so well at school. I don't necessarily like everything about myself, and I have struggles. You know, I know what it's like to be different, and I don't like picking on people because they're different. You know, which is why I disagree with some of the anti-wokers when they really come down hard, like, oh, these Gen Z freaks and these weirdos, these stupid, dumb little kids. And I wonder if you ever get tired of that golden age, because I'm assuming you, like me, are a Gen Z. So, you know, do you ever feel
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah,
will
and
you
I'm
just stop?
yeah, and I'm not someone who's like a how would you say it? A like
Anti-woker?
no, like a very strong traditionalist. You know, like I'm someone who it would be considered quite weird to most people because I do things. You know, I don't really put myself in a lot of social situations just because I don't really like being in large groups of people. I like to just be on my own, you know.
Yep.
Wherever when everyone else used to play sports and all that, I would like sit on the field and just look up in the sky and things. Like I've always been someone who's very detached from everyone else, and I'm fine with that. I have no problem with that. People always seem to use that as an insult. They always seem to point it out, but I'm pretty proud of it. And I've always been someone who, like, one of my main creative sort of like inspirations, one of the people I look up to the most, not in terms of, because again I don't really look up to celebrities and things, but
Yeah.
someone whose work I've always looked at is Tim Burton, who's a very a very unique person in his own right.
Mm.
He I've always sort of modeled myself after that. So yeah, I'm not someone who is going to go after people and say, oh, well, you're a man and you're not the most ripped person and you're not the most sort of boisterous individual. That's wrong. You need to change. I'm not going to do that.
Well, absolutely, because some of people I knew who were older said, "Oh, Tim Burton's a weirdo," or Marilyn Manson, he's a weirdo, and it's like, no, they're not. They're artists. They're just misunderstood. They've got their own way of seeing the world. They've got their own way, and there's nothing wrong with that. See, the problem with the right versus left argument is it's one extreme or the other,
Yeah,
and
and there's
that
no
is the
middle
problem.
ground.
And I've noticed, and I hate to call them out, but I've noticed that with people like the Friday Night Tights lot, they have gone so far into the sort of, the right wing take back of society that they're bringing on political people like Alex Jones and all that. And they are just, you guys aren't geeks. I'm sorry. You've got a few action figures on the shelves behind you. Congratulations. Okay. You may have been at one point, but you guys are political commentators.
I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I wouldn't agree with that 100%. I would say, someone like Gary, who's like big into comics and all that, I would say he is like, a true geek and all that. But I will admit, when it comes to, because I watch Friday Night Lights every single week, and I have no
Mm.
problem with saying that I love those creators. But I will disagree with them from time to time, and I'll say, hang on, I did like this, whereas you may not, and stuff. But I do find it quite irritating when it's like, next week we're going to bring on this conservative commentator, and I'm thinking, no, I want to bring on someone who has a YouTube channel and they're talking about Star Wars and things.
Yeah.
I want to see those people. I don't want, and I mean, I get the argument that more people in the mainstream need to be aware of how important culture is, because once they are aware of that, then they'll see how much it just transcends all the politics stuff. I get that, but
Exactly,
I
but
come to
they're
those
bringing,
people for like entertainment and talking
yeah.
about pop culture, not to be
It's
not
not
to
like
watch
you're watching
something
an
that's
episode
akin
of,
to Fox News.
yeah, it's not like you're watching, exactly, I was just about to say, it's not like you're watching an episode of Fox News, and that's what it feels like. Like, occasionally I tune into Friday Night Lights, and I'm thinking, oh, what are they going to be talking about? And they're going on mostly about American politics. Now, obviously, I'm not going to have a bloody clue what they're talking about. I come on, Gary's best videos for me have always been his Doctor Who videos. I think that
Yeah.
you can see how much of a fan he is, and you can see the passion there. I don't see that in a lot of his other stuff. It just feels like he's phoning it in, like he's reading off a script, like he is getting involved in this thing because he wants to be on television. He wants to kind of have that platform, that fame. And I'm like, you've compromised your individuality for the spotlight. And I know, Golden Age Geek, you actually went to meet them, and he told you, as you posted, I know he said, you brilliant that you got a channel and it's your responsibility to put this message out. And I was like, and I did think to myself, and I hope you won't mind me saying this. I'm like, no, no, it's your responsibility to be you. Okay, it's your responsibility, and that's why I love your channel, Golden Age Geek, because you are you, and you're genuine with your opinions. You're not just doing the same. You're not just phoning it in. You know, you're like, oh, something's happened. Got to make like 10 videos on something someone said. It's like, you know, you're
Yeah, I mean,
being.
I don't want to like I will, I'm not going to correct myself, but I'll say this: I don't know whether it's the way I phrased it in that tweet or something else. I don't really think he said, you know, it's your responsibility to spread the message, as much as he said it's your responsibility to carry on this love of fandom, because not many people nowadays do. So to be fair to him, I'll say that I may have phrased it in a way that didn't really suggest that,
Oh,
but I feel like that's the way he said it, more
oh, I
like
beg your pardon then. So he actually agrees with me. He thinks, you know, the kind of, you know, we need to keep the geekism alive. It needs to keep going, because otherwise what will happen, what I worry is going to happen, everything will swing too far the other way. And then before long, you'll have people looking at us and going, "Oh, you're weirdos. You're antichrist. You're, you know." It's going to swing too far the other way, and
Well,
that's
I
one
think
thing that
how the
I worry about.
conversation went is I said, you know, I've been watching your channel for many years. I appreciate what you do and all that sort of thing. And I said, I've launched my own channel talking about, you know, primarily Doctor Who. And he said, great. And I think it's great that, you know, people much younger than myself are starting to speak their mind on entertainment, because at the end of the day, once I'm gone, it's you that is going to have to, you know, sort of remind everyone how good entertainment used to be, that sort of thing. So that's the general vibe that I got from our
Oh, well,
conversation.
well then I apologize. I may have been a
No,
little
no,
bit
that's fine.
hasty.
I always misphrase things, like, because sometimes the issue I have when I'm putting stuff on the internet is I kind of assume that everyone knows the context that I do, and I don't
Yeah.
always explicitly state it. So, you know, that is a mistake that I make from
Oh well,
time to
Gary,
time.
if somehow you ever do come across this video, which I doubt it, but don't take it to, is the thing. It is difficult because he's become so popular. You know, I send him fan art from time to time, and his wife, she's lovely, Miss N. She runs the
Yeah.
Instagram. She will throw it up every now and then, but sometimes I'd like, oh, I'd love to know what Gary thinks. This never get a response, because the thing is, from my perspective, I could take that personally, but from his perspective, he probably has a whole warehouse of fan mail, you know, stacked up. It's like, that's the trouble when you get big. It's why I've always loved our little community. And,
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, I can. Oh, I'll let you go.
oh, sorry, no, I was just gonna say, even if I on this channel only amassed like, you know, a couple of thousand subs, it'd be so great if I just was able to have a little community. I'd much prefer that, because I'm not looking to YouTube as like my main career. I'm just looking at it as a nice little hobby. And I think the good thing about having a community is, you know, it's just a nice place to be. But when you get too big, you kind of lose track of everyone. So, oh, I can't keep up with all these bloody comments and things. But I'm going way off topic here, so sorry.
No,
Finish what you were saying.
no, I was going to just say, I'm not trying to speak for anyone else, because of course I can only speak for myself. So I'm not going to say that anyone else has been fake, or, you know, they're saying things that they don't believe. But I did get to the point about a year or so ago where I was making like 3 to 4 videos a day, and I was doing, as you say, what some of these other people do. I'm not saying they're wrong to do this. I'm just talking from my own experience. I would go onto sites and I'd see, right, the celebrity has said this. I'll make a video on it. Oh, but then something else has come out about Star Wars. I'll make a video on this. And then something about Marvel. And I made like 3 to 4 of those videos a day. And after a while, I found myself getting quite burnt out, because I thought, right, I'm kind of making videos that I think I should be doing, not that I want to be doing. So then I sort of homed that back and said, right, I'll move to a few videos a week and I'll put all my passion into it. And what am I most passionate about? Doctor Who. So then I started making like 2 to 3 videos a week, as opposed to like 4 videos a day, where I was talking about
Mm.
Doctor Who. And I felt myself having much more fun making the videos, because it's something I wanted to talk about, as opposed to something as I felt that I
And
needed to talk
I
about.
hope you don't mind me saying this, but I felt it. I felt it, because I did
Yeah.
feel like, you know, some of the videos, they you didn't, you did lots of them, and they just seemed to kind of I don't know, but when you did the Doctor Who
Like a
videos,
conveyor belt, like they were
yes,
sort of like being churned
I
out.
didn't
Yeah.
want to say it. I didn't want to say it, but when you did the
No, no,
Doctor
that's
Who
fine. That's fine.
videos, it's like, oh yeah, you know, this is what he's passionate about. And I love that, you know, you did mention that I actually do like this. I'm not just repeating what everyone else is saying. You know, you
Yeah.
do like some things, and you're not afraid to say that, and that just makes you feel genuine. And I think that gives a lot of people that impression, and that's why they're like,
Yeah,
oh, I'd
like
rather
I don't
listen.
Yeah, I don't blame these high profile content creators for talking about the acolyte, for example. It's something that needs to be talked about. You know, the way that we get back to good entertainment is by highlighting the problem. But for
Mm,
me, I can't. I know if I'm to watch the acolyte, which is like half an hour to 45-minute episodes, and there's like what, 8 or 9 of them, or by the time the season ends there will be. I can't do that because I know I'm not going to like it, and I'm going to just be watching it for the sake. Now it's different with Doctor Who because I know that I'm not going to enjoy these episodes. I haven't enjoyed the Shooting Gatsby episodes, but I feel engaged enough with them to have something to talk about. If I
yeah,
watch those Acolyte episodes, I'm going to just go, right, okay, well, that was rubbish. Moving on. Whereas with Doctor Who, I can watch that episode and go, wait, hang on, let's go into this. This talks about this event which happened in this season and it links to this, and the character doesn't make sense here. And I can actually sort of get into, you know, the meat of the story.
yeah. It's like if I was a casual Star Wars fan. You know, I liked the films as a kid, but I am nowhere near as invested in the Star Wars universe as I
Mm.
am the Doctor Who universe. So if I were to watch Acolyte, I probably wouldn't be able to point out most of the canon inconsistencies and the flaws because I'd be like, well, I only roughly know, things about things. But I mean, just judging by the stuff I've seen, that little woman who did that silly music video, I it's good entertainment. I will give it that when they talk about them. But one thing I don't agree with, and I would really love to put this point across to people, is hate watching. And the reason why I don't agree with it, and the reason why I've handed in my TARDIS key, I'm done, and I'm sticking by that. I don't agree with it because I think a lot of people don't realize that you're still giving these people traction by doing what you're doing. Now, I know some people have come up with an argument against that, and if that's everyone's opinion, that's fine. But my personal opinion, if you want to save Doctor Who, for God's sake, hand in your TARDIS key and walk away. It is the only way these people are going to stop, because I've said RTD is a playground bully and bullies love it when you get upset. That was what my first ever therapist told me. He said, Jack, if you pretend that, they're not getting to you, they will go, well, what's the point with you? And they'll leave you alone. The trouble with all these hate watchers who have built their channels solely around that is they are actually adding fuel to it. They're keeping the furnace slightly going, even if it's just a few embers. And I honestly think that if we were to all just stop talking about it and it faded to complete irrelevance, the show would get cancelled in the snap of the fingers, because hate does bring traction to something. And I think that's why when I made my channel, I didn't want to make it Doctor Who centered. If I'd have made my channel back in like 2010, 2013, I probably would have. But because I knew the state the show was in, it's like, well, I'll review Doctor Who action figures, I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to make it Doctor Who centric, because something really good could come along and I want to talk about that. And this has been going on for so many years now that no matter who I watch, it's just like, yeah, we've done this before, we've spoke about this before. Really the only thing that I enjoy, the highlights, is when something really, really stupid happens. But ultimately, I think we've got to stand our ground and we've got to say, look, we don't like this anymore, and we don't bloody want this anymore. Okay, now I myself might review the occasional Doctor Who action figure on my Jackrabbit, my Drawing Jackrabbit channel. It'll be classic Doctor Who. The new Who, I'm not going to give it the time of day, because I know that talking about it all the time and going, this happened, is only going to create more interest, and it's going to keep the fire going. You've got to stop. You've got to let the fire go out. You've got to, even if you have to chuck water on it, and then the show will go away. Because all these anti-wokers, they're playing into the industry's hands. They're keeping the cogs going, whether they realize it or not. And a lot of these film directors and these people who have come in have openly admitted they're doing it in response to these people. So if you guys would just move on to something else, a lot of these shows that we're seeing today probably wouldn't have even been made. And anyway, that's just a theory. I can't say this is absolute, but I think as geeks, we really need to start either just creating our own stuff or just coming together and going, let's find something else. And look, I will admit, drama is fun. We all love to tune into a bit of drama. We all love to, but I just think we really need to take a step back and go, we're making this situation worse here, aren't we? You know,
Yeah, I
and that's
mean, it's
honestly
kind of a
just my
hard
view on
thing
things.
to it's kind of a hard thing to discuss because I mean, on one level, someone may look at my channel and think that I'm just a hate watcher and doing all that sort of thing. But and maybe part of it is, but I like to think of myself as a bit more than that because, as I say, I am coming up with my own stories. I eventually hope to develop into like an animated series, which that is something that
Oh,
I'm
good.
doing as my
I
own
hope
creative
it, can I do
project.
some voice work for you?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it'll probably be a few years until this happens, but
I
sure.
can
I'm
play
always,
RTD if you want.
yeah. So yeah, so on the one level, someone may look at my channel and think I'm just hate watching, and maybe some of that's true, but I like to think of myself as a bit more. As I say, I'm doing my own projects, but also I'm not doing the typical sort of. I mean, I have, and I still will do from time to time when I need to talk about it, whether it's the ratings or something. But
Mm.
I've kind of moved away from the whole Doctor Who gets destroyed by
Yeah,
those
it's
type
so
of
fake.
videos.
It's so
I've
fake.
been like so the video I released yesterday was a review of the finale, so that's pretty I talked fairly. There were some bits that I gave praise to, some bits I criticized. The one today I'm going to be talking about, which is, yeah, to be fair, that is kind of like a hate watching type thing, but I think it needs to be talked about because it's in relation to the stuff that RTD is saying. Tomorrow though, I'm doing something that totally isn't like a hate watching type video, thing. I'm actually going to be taking the character of Rogue and directly comparing him to Captain Jack Harkness, and I'm going to be going through both of their stories, the plots of both of them, how they differ, and how Captain Jack was perfectly introduced, whereas Rogue, he doesn't really fit in with that
Yeah.
story. The story didn't really work well to introduce him. So I think I'm kind of adding a different perspective to the whole
I
situation.
think you are, and I think what's great is you're doing it from the perspective of a geek. You know, you're doing it like you are really just expressing a love for something you've loved and are comparing it with what we're getting it today, and you're doing it objectively, and you haven't got any agenda behind what you're doing. You're not trying to go, oh, this is the state of the world, this is why we need to go this way instead of that way. You're just taking an objective look at it and you're going like, I don't like this, we could do this better. That's absolutely fine. And I don't want to tell people, oh, you can't do that anymore. That's not what I'm saying. But I just think, you see, I haven't watched it. I haven't given them my view. I haven't given them my money. But I know that there are some people around who are still going to watch it. And there always are going to be. But I just think what we need to do is we need to kind of go more in the direction of, well, that sucked, and we need to go like, how could we do this better? But I do understand, why as a fan you're so invested, you want to stick with it. And I'm not about to criticize anyone for doing that, because we're all different. But just for me personally, I have just had enough. But no doubt I probably will, out of curiosity, be tuning in to see what other people are saying, just like, oh god, how bad are things truly going to get? But after this season, I I just think things have gotten so bad that I'm just not even interested anymore. That's really
Yeah, and
what's
that's
happened.
yeah, and that's fair. And I said this before when Space Babies came out and when The Devil's Call came out, I absolutely trashed on them. I didn't like them. I thought they were awful. And other channels in this sort of sphere did the same thing. When it came to Boom and I watched it, and by the end I was like, hang on a minute, this is like the first episode in like 7, 8 years that I've actually enjoyed. I said that, and I said that in my video, and I was expressing it on social media, and I had people who I'd been talking to for ages, and people who had also done videos, and they were going, "Oh, you're just a sellout now. You're a shill. Or are you trying to get access to all these, you know, Doctor Who related things?" And I was thinking, no, I just genuinely think it was a pretty good episode. Do I think it was Doctor Who had been saved after that point? No, but I said it how I saw it, and
Mm.
I'm willing to accept all the criticism for that, but it's not true. I wasn't given anything. I wasn't paid to say it was good or anything. I
No.
genuinely thought it was, and I will continue to say that. And so part of me, I understand where you're coming from as well. I think again, I understand all the different perspectives to this. I
Mm.
understand the opinion that by carrying on talking about it, we're sort of adding a bit of traction to it. I also do think the other side is a bit correct in the view that if we highlight the problem, then more people are going to see the problems, and then hopefully it will lead to more people dipping out of these shows. So
Yeah.
I kind of see both of the sides of it. I will continue to watch Doctor Who, but I will just say, the way I'm watching it,
Mm.
they're not gonna be benefiting from my view. But
No.
I will say that I will continue to criticize it. I'll praise it if praise is needed, if I feel it's deserved. And at the end of the day, you know, as I say, I'm a very honest content creator. I will say what I think. I'm not going to say something to be part of a group or to be invited on a live stream. I'll say how it is. I don't care about, certain groups accepting me. I kind of like the idea of me being a lone wolf. I don't want to be accepted into a big group of people with all the same opinions.
Yeah.
So I will continue to just say how it is. And to all those people that say that my channel is only there to sort of benefit from outrage and to create outrage, that's absolute nonsense. If Doctor Who came out next year and it was absolutely amazing and Russell had fixed all the issues I had with this season and parts of his original era, and it was the most amazing thing since Classic Who, I would say that, and I would, carry on supporting Doctor Who. I'm just a person who wants Doctor Who to be as good as it can possibly be, because it can be good if they want it to be good, and I will say that it is if it is, and if it isn't, then I'll say it isn't.
I think what we need to do as a community is, I think the content that you're doing already is great, but I think what we need to do is, even if it's going back to the old stuff, I think we need to prove to these people that we're not just all about outrage, and we need to talk about things that we like. Now, I've been very busy, so I apologize if I've missed you. You may have done a few videos or projects where you've talked about things that you like. I would love to do a stream on Alien, because I know Disney's new one is coming, which I'm really worried about, because I haven't enjoyed Prey and the recent Predator film, so I'm just really nervous. But I think we need to show that as geeks, we're not just all about the outrage, that we have a genuine love for things. And I think we need to. It's all right to still have the stuff. I think, as you've quite rightly said, to let people know, be informative, like this isn't good. I hope you don't mind doing that instead of me, because me personally, I'm just done, and obviously I'll be watching your videos, checking out your channel just to kind of fill me in on stuff. It's really great. But I think as geeks, we need to have a balance where we also go like, this is the stuff we like, and this is what we want. This is the kind of stuff that we like talking about, because we need to show our detractors that we're not just about the outrage, even though with everything that's going on today, like 9 times out of 10 things are going to produce outrage. But every now and then,
Yeah,
something does come along that makes you go, oh, that was actually pretty good, actually. And I just think we need to have a bit of a balance, because what I'm noticing, this is just something I've noticed, not with you, but with a few other channels, is a lot of their content is starting to become very samey. It's like, this is the same video that I watched last week, just with a few bits tweaked here and there, and a few different, and it's just like, it's starting to get very boring now.
yeah.
I find.
Inside, like for example, Inside Number Nine is a show that is finished now, but I actually loved it, and I'm hoping to do a few videos on that. And yeah, I do get what you're saying. I would say that oh god, I think I'm losing my train of thought here. What was it about? Oh yeah, here's what it is. So yeah, you're someone who, you've dipped out the show. You said, right, this clearly isn't being made for my interests or the fans' interests. So I'm gonna, take a break. And I think you even admitted during the stream, when I've brought up episodes, you've said, well, I don't really know much about that because I didn't actually watch the episode. And one instance where I was quite disappointed in a content creator, and it was Az from Hill versus Babyface, is he was on a stream and he was talking about Boom, and he was talking, and I thought he was actually having a productive conversation. He was saying how the characterization didn't fit, how the story didn't make sense, the plot, all of it was rushed, the pacing was off. He was criticizing every single aspect of the story, right? Of Boom. And then about 40 minutes later, after he'd had his huge rant, he said, well, I didn't actually watch the episode. And I was thinking, well, hang on a minute. You've just sat there for 40 minutes and you've criticized every single minute of it, but you haven't even watched it.
Yeah.
So you are just being fake at that point.
It's like, look, I said right from the start, I said I haven't watched these stories, but because I just could not put myself through it. I watched the 60th, You know, no one forced me to. No one told me to. Even despite what RTD did to me, I chose to watch them, and I just felt beat up by the end. So I made an active choice not to. So I know there's those people who come around and say like, you know, oh well, everything you say is irrelevant. But it's like, well, I've seen what other people have been saying about it, and that is telling me no, I don't want to go back and watch these. You know, so I'm just giving an opinion based on, you know, the things which the majority of people are saying, and it's like, no, this isn't Doctor Who. I mean, I decided to get off after the 60th because it's like the 60th, just that was it for me. I was just like, you know, but I don't think it makes someone's opinion irrelevant if they haven't seen it. If as long as they know what they're talking about, if they've watched what other people have said and they've got a group, it's like, okay, well, this happened in the plot, that happened, that sounds absolutely stupid. I'm not going to watch that. You know, then that's fair enough. But I think, yeah, to come on a stream and be like, you know, so thing, and then be like, oh, I actually didn't watch it. I just listened to what my other mate said. It's like, you know, that's a bit.
Yeah, if it's something that a celebrity has said or it's some clip that I've seen, then I'll happily criticize it. But if someone asks me for my opinion on like the Acolyte or whatever, I can't really give them much. I did a video on the Acolyte episode 3 because I was factoring in what the celebrities and the showrunners have said behind the scenes. I looked through all that. I did a bit of research. So I'm willing to criticize it, but I would never do a video pretending to have seen it and, you know, done a review of it because, you know, I haven't really seen it. But you know, the only video I did was on episode 3 because I saw all the fuss about episode 3. So I actually looked into it. I watched the clips. I looked at some of the comments that people have made. I didn't just go, right, someone else has done a video about this. Let me make a video. I actually looked into it and thought, hang on a minute, this doesn't really seem faithful to Star Wars. So I did a video on it. Again, it's all about I felt a passion. I felt the need to speak out as opposed to. So I wanted to speak out. I didn't really feel the need that I had to. It's something that I wanted to do.
Yeah. And it's perfectly okay to do that. As I say, you know, we're geeks, we're passionate people. That's just what we are. You know I've been passionate about Doctor Who for many years, but we've actually gone really over the time limit here, which is great because, you know, it just I feel like this stream has gone really well actually. But before we finish, I just wanted to bring up. I was bringing up the things about what Tennant said. That's why I went on about the whole trans issue. So yeah, David Tennant being, well, the 10th Doctor and my Doctor, I was already a bit miffed with some of the other things he said, but the main reason why I disagree with him is not because I am transphobic or whatever. It is simply because I don't like the idea of this stuff being pushed onto kids. That is the main fundamental argument. And I don't argue this from a political position. I argue this from just morals, really, and just what I consider to be common sense. And, you know, I'm not trying to force my opinion on anyone, but the way Tennant, I don't know if you've seen the infamous video where he's holding his LGBT award and he's calling for someone else to not exist. Don't know if
Yep,
you.
I saw that.
Yeah.
And he even admitted in that he's being controlled. He said, "I don't have social media. I don't know about all this stuff going on in the world. So my wife has to educate me." And he comes across as such a sheep.
Yeah, well, this has been the general thing. Like, lots of people have been saying, "Oh, it's Georgia. You know, she's got him by the short and curlies." And it's like, it's true, she has.
Do you know? I have a theory about that. Do you think, because remember back in 2017 when Jodie Whittaker was announced as the Doctor, her dad, you know, the 5th Doctor, came out and said, "I'm not sure about this," and he was chased off of social media. Do you think her being overly progressive and lecturing other people, do you think it's sort of like overly compensating for that incident?
I could believe that. I mean, from what I know of Peter Davison, he was in an original marriage. It was very unhappy. My mom said apparently she was a right piece of work. And this is Georgia's mother. So Peter's remarried again. And I mean, this is probably like a bit deep to go into on stream, but because, you know, as I say, it's not really my business. But it just seems to me as though, you know, Georgia, I don't know, she's very your typical social media, like, oh, look at me, you know, look at how progressive I am. And it's just because David Tennant's attitude has changed so quickly. You know, because I don't know if you remember that interview where he was being asked, along with Jodie Whittaker, you know, who's your favorite Doctor, and he said William Hartnell, the first Doctor, and he made that extra thing to go the first Doctor. It was almost like a jab at the timeless child, you know, that he wasn't happy with what Chibnall
Yeah,
did. And I
and
was like, yeah, you know, that I thought that was great. I was like, yeah,
and
there's no way Tennant would be down with this because he's a lifelong fan. He loves this show. He wouldn't be down with this crap. So I felt like
yeah,
that was
and
a fun little nod, a fun little jab, and I really liked that. And then all of a sudden it changed. It's like as soon as he was coming back, you know, he started wearing badges, and then he was going on rants on and saying things. There
yeah,
was
and
even a video. I don't know if you've seen it, but someone was recording meeting him at Comic-Con, and he was like, "Oh, you've helped me get through so much, and all these people who bully me." And he was like, "Oh, just tell them to f off and all that."
yeah, I saw
And
that.
yeah, and it's
And
just like, oh god,
I thought it was apparent for a while that Russell hated what Chibnall had done. Because I remember during lockdown when they did the watch-alongs, and it came to Journey's End where all the companions are having that like FaceTime, and Russell tweeted out something along the lines of, "Oh well, it's not exciting now, is it? Considering that there are infinite Doctors out there, and any one of them could join at any moment." And people thought, "Oh, that's him taking a dig at Chibnall." But then, you know, when the 60th came out, "Oh, I love my friend Chris Chibnall. I'm going to defend what he's done." All those people out there who want to erase his stories. "You're so
yeah.
mean. Doctor Who has always been about change. If you can't accept that, then go away." And
I
it
think
was just a massive shift.
I think something has happened behind the scenes. Maybe Russell originally was coming back to save the show, and someone higher up, someone, I don't know whether it was Disney or the BBC, someone got him and said, "You you dare alter what we're doing. You deviate in any way from what we're doing, and you're in trouble, mate." And it just seems like I don't know. I don't know if he's going through something. Obviously, it's very sad. You know, he lost his partner, and problem being said, it might have taken a massive toll on his mentality because he seems to be borderline schizophrenic. You know, one minute he's complaining about. You remember he went on that rant about wokeness in writing and how it's made television bad, and then he goes and makes that. And it's like, are there two Russell T Davises? Are there two of them? Do they keep on like fighting to be in front of the camera? Because he's just the most incoherent person I've ever. I can't make sense of him, and you know. But back to Tennant. It's just, oh, you've let me down. And do you know what? You can have your beliefs, okay? I don't agree with what you're doing with your kids, but look, it's your family. It's none of my business. And I mean that sincerely. It is none of my business. I don't come on here and tell you how to live your life. I've put my position forward about how I feel. But to go up on stage like that and say, you know, and to go on that rant and to wish someone not to exist, you know, it kind of reminds me of the people who said, you know, oh, if you disagree with us, delete yourself. And it's like, and he knew he messed up. He knew because you could see it in his face.
Yeah,
He's like, oh,
after
did I just say that? So he immediately goes back
yeah,
and says, oh, I don't wish harm on her. It's like, well, you do because you've just said it.
and I think you know full well that if one of us was to say anything, not even like close to that, but something along the lines of that, it would be clipped out, it would be shared. These people want us gone. They're alt-right toxic trolls.
Yeah.
He's not going to get the same treatment by the
Oh,
media
but
because
he
he
is.
agrees with all their talking points.
But he is golden. I
Oh,
didn't realize I was still following his Twitter, which isn't run by him. But I've unfollowed. But I looked at the post of him, you know, holding the award in the air, and I just thought I'll have a little browse at the comments section. I bet it's all going to be like yes men and people going, oh yeah, oh my goodness me, he has lit a fire that he will not be able to extinguish. The
I think
comments,
because
like,
yeah, because I think his sort of his wokeness has sort of backfired on him because he went after a black woman and
Hmm.
he's a white male, and he hasn't realized that because the people he panders to are all about identity and all this, he's painted himself in a very
Yeah,
bad
now
light.
I'm not going to turn around and go and jump on the bandwagon and be like, "Oh yeah, you racist, misogynist." No, but I think a lot of people are doing it because, like, well, this is how you would treat us, so now you're getting a taste of your own medicine in many ways, and that is the horrible, horrible thing about this wokeness. Is like, imagine having to live a life where you are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that no one should have to live like that. It's not a
Exactly.
world that
These
I want to
people
live
put
in.
themselves in a prison. They put themselves in a prison where they're constantly looking over their shoulders in case of, they're attacked or anything. And that's why I have no problem with speaking my mind, because I'd rather speak my mind. And when someone confronts me about my beliefs, I can go, right, yeah, that's what I believe. That's what I said, and I stand by it, as opposed to, oh, what do I have to say now? Oh, but I don't want to offend this person, but they may take it this way, so maybe I should word it. No, no, no. That's not how I live. That's not how anyone should live. If you're
No.
that afraid of saying what you think, then something's wrong.
And listen, even if you're wrong and you say what you think, if you are a genuine racist, right, and you say something nasty to someone, do you know what that person should do if we lived in a perfect world? Not destroy them, not turn around and go, oh, yeah, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to raise you. You deserve to be erased. I'm going to be, no, you say, I'm sorry you feel that way. Can we sit down? Cup of coffee? Can I change your mind? Okay, I'm sorry about that. Wish you well. At the end of the day, you don't become the good guy by fighting fire with fire. If your goal, right, is to be tolerant, and then you've got to be tolerant of those who are not going to agree with you. Like the people who bullied me at high school, I'm not going to find out where they live now and make them suffer for the things they did to me in the past. That says more about you than it does anything. And these people who preach tolerance, isn't it funny how they seem to be the most horrible, most bullying, most intolerable people on the planet? It's just,
Yeah.
oh, I think it's all just a load of nonsense. And do you know what, Tennant? Right, I wish you well, mate, but you have just ended your career. I am telling you now, you're never going to recover from this. And do you know what? Well, you need to sort yourself out. And I think you need to sit down and you need to really, just kind of have a good think about what you're aligning yourselves with, not just for your sake, but for the sake of your family. Okay? Because, look, I know this is a controversial topic and I didn't really want to go too much into this, but, you were such a big hero. I loved you. And I don't say that lightly. I really, it's like a huge part of me has just disappeared, and a part of me thinks, oh, maybe if I can't beat them, I just join them and I think the way they do. But it's like, honestly, with morals, I just can't. I just don't agree with this. And I said this years ago. I said, if Tennant ever jumps on this bandwagon, it is going to kill it for me. I said, for the most of it, you've seen all these other actors, even classical actors, do it. Tennant seemed to stay quiet. He seemed to stay quite, he's like, no, he's too smart to fall for something like this. Past year, he has just nuked his own career, and he's shattered the illusion. Now, I think I'm on the very same page as you, Golden. I think the best thing I can do is to separate the character from the actor, because I have to realize that, and it's a hard lesson to learn when you grow up. Your heroes are just human beings. They're flawed, just like we all are. And what you're seeing on screen is just pretend, and that's the hardest part about growing up. You
I
know,
mean,
it,
it's with David Tennant, it's something that's inevitable with any actor, because their entire job is not to just act, but it's to stay relevant. And that means saying things that are going to get backlash and are going to, annoy people, because that's what their job effectively is. It's to stay relevant, it's to stay in people's minds, even if that's people hating them, or people thinking that they're allies or something. That's what he's done. His name is out there, even though he isn't really doing much at the moment, because he's stirring the pot.
and that's horrible to me. I that your job as an actor isn't to lecture people. It's to play. It's to play. Look, I don't know what the industry's like because I've never been in it, but it sounds like it's a very hard industry. It's a bit of a struggle, but I just think to have to sell your soul to stay at the top. I just don't think it's worth
Yes,
it.
yes. Imagine if, right? Imagine if David Tennant, he reverted back to how he was, however many years ago, and he was a normal human being. And of course, he has differences to him. Of course, he'll have things that we don't believe, and which he does. But imagine if he was just still like a kind person who perhaps respectfully disagree with people.
Yeah.
Imagine if, right, he wouldn't have had to have done all this stuff that he's doing now. Imagine if, right, this would have been the greatest thing ever. He did set up a YouTube channel and he was to go through each of the episodes he was in. He'd talk about, what it was like filming, how, like what we're doing. He talks about growing up with Doctor Who, how much it all meant to him. He brought on other actors and they talked about, the stories they grew up with and, the enjoyment they had making them. That would have been amazing. And he wouldn't have had to have done all this stuff. Everyone would have tuned into those videos. Everyone would have loved it.
I know he's not in the limelight as much as other celebrities, but Christ, when I went to see him at Telford Comic Con, allegedly he made £100,000 that day, but by appearing there, the
And this
amount
is
of
a guy
fans,
that says to the public, tax the rich.
yeah, shut up. Like, it's like people like Russell having the nerve to say that they're oppressed when they just shut up. And the queue to meet him was out the door, just as I'm sure it is everywhere. You might not be on the front of magazines, you might not be, and everything, but I always saw Tennant as someone who would come into the television zone every now and then, but he was more of a theatre actor, and he loved his job, he loved his profession. But I think because he's not the right demographic anymore, it's causing problems. So a lot of the celebrities feel like they have no choice but to align themselves with this stuff in order to stay relevant, and that's horrible. That
Yeah, I
is
mean,
that is truly horrible.
The videos just came out with the Disney executives, and they admitted that there's just some demographics of people we don't cast anymore because they're not the image that we want, and it's
Oh, I
horrible that
noticed that the
people are.
person saying that was the so-called image they don't want.
Mm,
It's funny how it's one rule for one and another for everyone else, isn't it?
yeah.
But honestly, I think I've said all I need to say on this topic, and we're pushing the 3 hour limit now. So, Golden, I just wanted to say, is there anything you'd like to add to what we've talked about? Anything you want to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered most of the bases. Talked about how we got into Doctor Who, and then unfortunately all the stuff that has transpired
Yeah.
since. All I will say to people is that if you're someone out there who hasn't seen Doctor Who, I know it's easy to say, right, just forget about it 'cause it's trash now, but really do consider watching it. Go back to Classic Who, watch all that, and I would still say watch all of the stuff up until when Jodie came into it, because I think it's still top tier television, and I'm sure you'll find enjoyment in those stories. And but yeah, as for me, I'm gonna sort of live true to my word, and if the stuff nowadays is not good, which it isn't, then I'm gonna start creating my own stuff, and hopefully that will be great, and hopefully eventually I can get that out to as many people as possible, and they find an alternate vision of how Doctor Who should be in those, and they enjoy those. So yeah, that's mainly it, really.
Brilliant. Yeah, and honestly, I hope one day I can get back into it. Maybe when things are calmed down and I'm feeling a lot better and a lot happier in myself, I can put on Classic Who again, and I just know where to stop. I just like, right, I'll go to this point and I'll just know where to stop. And hopefully I can enjoy my childhood again and I can look back on it again with joy. And that's what I want. And, I don't wish any ill will towards anyone. I honestly thought the thumbnail for this video was a bit OTD, but we can thank Problem Being for that. It's fantastic, don't get me wrong, but it's an interesting one. He's really good. Go check him out. Ordered Audio Visuals. If you guys want graphic art done for your YouTube channels, he's your man. Honestly, he's so good. He's actually helped me design my new logo for Drawing Jackrabbit. It's so wonderful, so check that out. Golden, do you want to plug yourself, your channel and your Twitter and everything?
Yeah, so you can just find me mainly at Golden Age Geek on every platform, including YouTube. I was going to do a video today, but it's getting a little bit late. But that's absolutely fine because I've loved doing
Apologies.
this stream. No. I would rather talk about the good old days and reminisce on all those memories with you than have to talk about the current stuff. So the next video should be out tomorrow, and I'm going to try and do videos every day after that. See, as for me, you can just check out those videos, and on social media I'll be talking about various things, and that's mainly it, really. I just look forward to talking about Doctor Who with you and other people that may be in the chat later down the line, because I still love this franchise and I want to talk about it as much as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, I keep saying I'm done, but I just know something will get me back into talking to it. Because, it's like when you've loved something for so long, it doesn't matter how much you say you're going to or you say you want to, you'll never let it go. There'll always be something that keeps you talking about it. And are you up for doing another stream like this at some point?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. So I'm glad you've had a good time, because this is like a bit of a first for me. I know I've done 2 previous ones, but they weren't very professional. So I'm hoping to get this channel up and running. I just feel I'm in the sort of period of, really getting my voice back and getting my channels going again. I've got some toy reviews in the making for my Drawing Jackrabbit channel. Be sure to check that out, guys. Lots of action figure stuff. Might even get some art stuff on there soon. My Twitter is jackmain13, so you can go check that out. I don't post often, but when I do, I post some artwork on there or just some general things that I'd like to talk about. And like, share this video, subscribe to this channel. I'm trying to get this little podcast channel going, so I'll be doing more videos and streams like this. Just general chit chats, ones that don't require too much editing, because I am terrible at editing. Like I say, I need the help of Lee for Problem Bean to get my editing going. But no, thank you for the people who've been watching. I've noticed we had up to 5 people watching. Really appreciated PD in the chat, Problem Being, and Burneman. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Just thanks to all of you in the chat.
Oh,
Who else?
Brunjol.
Who was it?
Brunjol.
Oh yeah, Matteo Conti as well. Thanks for all your comments. I know you like the Moffat era. That's wonderful. Who knows? I might appreciate it more when I eventually get round to watching it. I'm doing a new Who marathon at the moment. My classic Who marathons come to a complete halt because I just feel like it needs a rest. I want to watch it when I'm happy and wanting to watch it, instead of just getting through
Yeah,
it.
I'm doing a classic Who rewatch, but even though it's Doctor Who and I absolutely love it, I can't just watch it continuously. I've been because I'm also watching Star Trek for the first time as well, so I'm on Next Generation, so I kind of alternate between those. I'll watch some classic Who and then I'll take a little bit of a rest and watch some Star Trek.
It's not a show you can really marathon easily. I find it's always one of those, I'm in the mood for that specific story, so I'll watch that one.
Well, that's one of the things that I do prefer about New Who. Sometimes I appreciate how classic Who kind of drags out the stories and sort of squeezes out all the potential. But sometimes when you have like a 6-part story, it's not something you can easily just watch all of it in one go. So with the New Who, I probably would be able. Yeah.
No, that's cool. But anyway, Golden Age, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. Thanks so much for coming on. It's great to know that someone, us Gen Zs, we can stick together and prove some of our detractors wrong. We're not all awful. Most of us are actually pretty cool. I've started a job at a cafe and, I'm working with people younger than me, and they're actually disagreeing with a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with today. So I would argue that actually most of us aren't losers, as we're often made out to be. But thanks for coming on. It's been absolutely brilliant, and big thank you to all those of you who've been watching. I hope you stay safe and happy wherever you are in the world, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye bye, guys.
Bye.